In this video, we're breaking down 3 hours of South Park facts that are way too interesting to sleep through. Let's get into it. South Park originally was made entirely with construction paper. Before South Park became the computer animated show millions watch today, the pilot episode Cartman Gets an Anal Probe was created using physical construction paper cutouts, stop-motion animation, and a process so tedious it nearly killed the entire project before it could become a series. The episode that premiered on the 13th of August 1997 required months of production time and thousands of individual photographs to create just 22 minutes of animation. The construction paper technique originated with 2 short films created before South Park became a television series. The first short was titled The Spirit of Christmas, Jesus vs. Frosty. This film was created in 1992 for a college animation class at the University of Colorado Boulder. The animation featured 4 boys who resembled early versions of Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Kenny. The boys found a magic hat in the snow during winter. When they placed the hat on a snowman they had built, the snowman came to life. However, the snowman was not friendly like Frosty in traditional Christmas stories. The snowman was violent and murderous. The snowman chased the boys through the snow. The snowman killed one of the boys in a graphic manner with blood visible on screen. Jesus Christ appeared as a character to fight the evil snowman. Jesus used divine powers to battle the snowman and ultimately defeated it. The film ended with Jesus resurrecting the dead boy who had been killed by the snowman. The entire 5-minute film was created using construction paper cutouts, photographed frame by frame on an animation stand. The animation required approximately 3,600 individual photographs at 12 frames per second. Each photograph showed the paper cutouts in slightly different positions. When the photographs were played in rapid sequence, the slight position changes created the illusion of movement. The technique was identical to traditional stop-motion animation, used in classic Christmas specials like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, except using paper instead of 3-dimensional puppets. The production process for Jesus vs. Frosty was extremely labor-intensive. Construction paper was purchased from local art supply stores in Boulder, Colorado. The paper came in various colors, including flesh tones for character skin, bright colors for clothing, white for snow, and brown for ground. Character shapes were drawn on paper and then cut out by hand using scissors and X-Acto knives. Each character required multiple separate cutout pieces. A single character might need 5 or 6 different versions showing different poses, expressions, or positions. Arms and legs were often separate pieces that could be moved independently from the body to create walking or gesturing motions. The animation stand consisted of a horizontal flat surface with a camera mounted on a stand above it pointing directly downward. The flat surface served as the stage where paper cutouts were positioned. Lights were positioned around the stand to illuminate the cutouts evenly without creating harsh shadows. The camera photographed the cutouts from above. After each photograph, the animator moved the paper pieces slightly to show the next moment of movement. The camera photographed again. This process repeated thousands of times for the entire film. The physical demands of creating Jesus vs. Frosty were significant. The animator worked alone for several weeks on the project. Hours were spent hunched over the animation stand, positioning tiny paper pieces. The work required intense concentration because each frame needed to be positioned precisely. If a piece was moved too far, the animation would look jumpy. If a piece was not moved enough, the animation would appear frozen. The animator's back ached from bending over the stand. Eyes strained from focusing on small details. Fingers cramped from manipulating tiny paper pieces hour after hour. Jesus vs. Frosty featured crude animation and extremely offensive humor that shocked viewers who saw it. The story showed 4 boys who resembled the future South Park characters, but with slightly different names and appearances. When the evil snowman came to life, it spoke in a demonic voice. The snowman chased the boys through a snowy landscape. One boy was caught and killed violently. Blood sprayed from the boy's body. The death was not sanitized or made child-friendly. Jesus appeared as a heroic figure with superpowers who fought the snowman. The battle between Jesus and the snowman featured quasi-religious imagery mixed with violence. Parker included profanity throughout the short film. The child characters swore frequently using words that would never appear in mainstream children's animation. The dialogue included explicit curse words spoken by young children. This combination of cute child characters and adult language created a jarring comedic effect. The animation quality was rough and amateurish by professional standards. The characters looked childlike and simplistic, with basic shapes representing heads, bodies, and limbs. Facial features were minimal, with simple dots for eyes and basic lines for mouths. The backgrounds were extremely basic construction paper landscapes. White paper represented snow covering the ground. Brown paper represented dirt or ground beneath snow. Simple cutout shapes represented trees, buildings, and other environmental features. There was no attempt at realistic perspective or detailed environments. The overall aesthetic was crude but strangely compelling. The handmade quality gave the film a distinctive look that stood out from computer, animation, or traditional cell animation. Professor Brian Hardin at the University of Colorado Boulder gave Parker a good grade on the Jesus vs. Frosty assignment. Hardin recognized the ambition of the project, even if the execution was imperfect by professional standards. Creating any stop-motion animation as a student project demonstrated significant commitment and effort. Other students in the film program saw Jesus vs. Frosty when it was screened in class. Many students enjoyed the offensive humor and crude style. The film stood out from typical student film projects that tended to be more conventional and safe. Students began making VHS copies of Jesus vs. Frosty and passing them to friends. This was common practice in the early 1990s before internet file sharing existed. Students routinely copied movies, music videos, and short films onto blank VHS tapes and shared them. Jesus vs. Frosty developed a small cult following on the University of Colorado Boulder campus. Students appreciated the willingness to create such offensive content for a class assignment. Most students created safe, conventional projects designed not to offend professors or generate controversy. Parker had created something genuinely shocking. Matt Stone saw Jesus vs. Frosty circulating on campus and thought it was funny. Stone was impressed by Parker's creative boldness. The film demonstrated a specific comedic sensibility that matched Stone's own sense of humor. Both men appreciated irreverent comedy that pushed boundaries and offended sensibilities. Stone and Parker became closer friends after Stone discovered Parker had created the animated short. They began discussing potential future creative projects together. They talked about creating more animated shorts using similar techniques. They wrote comedy sketches together. They collaborated on student film projects. Their creative partnership solidified during this period at University of Colorado Boulder. The second short film was created in 1995, 3 years after Jesus vs. Frosty. This version was also titled The Spirit of Christmas, but was subtitled Jesus vs. Santa, to distinguish it from the earlier film. The creation of this second film came about through an unusual circumstance involving a Fox Broadcasting Company executive. Brian Graydon was working as an executive at Fox in Los Angeles. Graydon had attended the University of Colorado Boulder several years before Parker and Stone enrolled there. Graydon maintained connections to the university and occasionally received materials from current students and alumni. Someone showed Graydon a VHS copy of Jesus vs. Frosty in late 1995. Graydon enjoyed the short film despite its crude production quality and offensive content. Graydon appreciated the subversive humor and distinctive animation style. In late 1995, Graydon wanted to send video Christmas cards to friends and industry contacts. Graydon decided he wanted something more interesting than standard Christmas greetings. He wanted an animated video card that would be memorable and entertaining. Graydon contacted Parker and Stone with a proposition. He offered to pay them $200 to create a new animated Christmas card using the construction paper technique from Jesus vs. Frosty. Graydon wanted something similar in style, but with a new story. Parker and Stone agreed to the project immediately. The $200 payment was significant money for students and recent graduates. The project also gave them professional experience and a connection to the entertainment industry. Parker and Stone began work on Jesus vs. Santa in late 1995. They decided to create a second Spirit of Christmas short using the same construction paper cutout technique. They refined the character designs slightly from the first film. The boys looked more distinct from each other. The animation quality improved as Parker and Stone learned from their experience on the first film. They developed a new story that was longer and more elaborate than the original 5-minute film class project. The plot of Jesus versus Santa featured the four boys discovering a conflict between Jesus Christ and Santa Claus over the true meaning of Christmas. Jesus believed Christmas should celebrate his birth and focus on religious themes. Santa Claus believed Christmas should celebrate gift-giving and secular holiday traditions. The two figures fought each other physically. The boys tried to determine who was right about Christmas. The story culminated in the boys learning a message about the commercialization of Christmas and religious versus secular holiday traditions. The animation process for Jesus versus Santa followed the same construction paper technique as the first film. Parker and Stone purchased colored construction paper from art supply stores. They cut out character shapes by hand using scissors and X-Acto knives. They created multiple versions of each character showing different poses and expressions. They used a basic animation stand with a camera mounted above. They photographed each frame individually. They moved the paper cutouts slightly between frames to create the illusion of movement when photographs were played in sequence. The production process remained extremely tedious and time-consuming. However, Parker and Stone worked together on this project rather than Parker working alone. Stone helped with cutting out characters, positioning pieces, and photographing frames. The collaboration made the work go faster and allowed them to complete a longer film. They worked for several weeks to complete the approximately 5-minute animation. They recorded voices for all the characters themselves. They added a simple musical soundtrack. They completed the project and delivered the finished film to Brian Graydon in December 1995. Graydon was very satisfied with the final product. The animation quality exceeded what he had expected. The humor was offensive and funny. The story was more developed than the first Jesus vs. Frosty film. Graydon proceeded with his plan to use the film as a video Christmas card. He had VHS copies made of Jesus vs. Santa at a professional duplication facility. He created labels for the tapes. He sent the video greeting cards to approximately 100 friends and industry contacts in Hollywood during the December 1995 holiday season. The recipients included executives at television networks, film studios, and production companies. The list included producers, directors, writers, and actors working in the entertainment industry. Many recipients found Jesus vs. Santa hilarious and memorable. The crude construction paper animation was unique. The story about Jesus and Santa fighting was shocking and funny. Recipients made additional copies of the tape and passed them to colleagues and friends. The VHS tape began spreading throughout Hollywood through this informal network of copying and sharing. By January 1996, Jesus vs. Santa had reached far more people than the original 100 recipients. The tape reached increasingly prominent figures in the entertainment industry throughout 1996. George Clooney received a copy of Jesus vs. Santa and loved it. Clooney made additional VHS copies and distributed them to friends, including other actors and directors. Demi Moore received a copy and also shared it with colleagues. Brad Pitt saw the film. Steven Spielberg reportedly saw it. Multiple studio executives at major film studios and television networks watched Jesus vs. Santa. The tape's reputation grew despite having no official distribution or promotion. By mid-1996, Jesus vs. Santa had become an underground sensation in Hollywood. The film was being discussed at parties and industry events. People who worked in film and television passed copies to anyone who had not seen it yet. The animation's crude style made it memorable. The offensive content about Jesus and Santa made it shocking. The combination of childlike characters and adult humor created a distinctive comedic voice. Industry professionals recognized that whoever created this short film had talent and a unique perspective. Comedy Central executives saw Jesus vs. Santa in early 1996 through this informal distribution network. Someone at the network received a copy and showed it to programming executives. Comedy Central was actively seeking new original programming to distinguish itself from other cable networks. The network had launched in 1991 through the merger of two earlier comedy cable channels called the Comedy Channel and the Comedy Channel. Comedy Central featured stand-up comedy specials, sketch comedy shows like Upright Citizens Brigade, and reruns of sitcoms like Saturday Night Live. The network wanted to develop more original, animated content. Network executives recognized that Jesus vs. Santa demonstrated potential for a television series. The short film showed a unique comedic voice. The animation style was distinctive and memorable. The content was offensive in ways that would attract attention and generate discussion. Comedy Central executives contacted Parker and Stone in mid-1996 to discuss developing the concept into a television series. The network proposed creating a pilot episode to see if the characters and style could sustain a full 22-minute episode suitable for broadcast. The development process began in earnest throughout 1996. Comedy Central wanted to see if the construction paper aesthetic and comedic style could work for television. The network offered Parker and Stone the opportunity to create a pilot episode. If the pilot was successful, Comedy Central would order additional episodes for a full season. Parker and Stone needed to develop the concept beyond 2 5-minute short films. The characters needed names and distinct personalities. The setting needed to be established. Supporting characters needed to be created. Episode storylines needed to be developed. The main characters were designed and named during this development phase. The 4 boys from the shorts became Stan Marsh, Kyle Broflovsky, Eric Cartman, and Kenny McCormick. Each character was given specific personality traits. Stan was designed as the relatively normal protagonist who served as the audience's entry point into South Park's bizarre world. Stan would be the character viewers could relate to most easily. Kyle was Stan's best friend and was Jewish. Kyle would often serve as the voice of reason or moral center of the group. Eric Cartman was designed as the antagonist among the boys. Cartman was fat, selfish, racist, and generally horrible. He would create conflict and represent the worst aspects of childhood, selfishness, and cruelty. Kenny McCormick was the 4th character. Kenny wore an orange parka that covered most of his face and muffled his speech. Kenny would become the character who died frequently. The fictional town was named South Park, after a real geographic feature in central Colorado. There's an actual high grassland basin in central Colorado called South Park. The basin is surrounded by mountain ranges, including the Mosquito Range and the Park Range. The real South Park is sparsely populated with small ranching communities. The fictional South Park in the show was designed as a small mountain town in Colorado similar to real Colorado mountain towns like Breckenridge, Aspen, or Vail, but smaller and less affluent. The town of South Park was given specific geography and landmarks. The town had a main street with shops and businesses, including a grocery store, a bar, and various other establishments. The town had South Park Elementary School where the boys attended classes. The school would be a major setting for many episodes. The town had residential neighborhoods where characters lived in houses. The town was surrounded by mountains and forests. This Colorado mountain town setting became the permanent home for the series. Supporting adult characters were created to populate the town. Chef was designed as the school cafeteria cook who sang soul music songs and gave advice to the boys about relationships and sex. Mr. Garrison was created as the boys' teacher at South Park Elementary. Mr. Garrison would be an incompetent and inappropriate teacher with various psychological issues. Officer Barbrady was created as the town's incompetent police officer. These supporting characters gave the boys adults to interact with beyond their parents. The boys' parents were designed as characters who would appear regularly. Stan's parents were Randy and Sharon Marsh. Randy would become increasingly prominent in later seasons. Kyle's parents were Gerald and Sheila Broflovsky. Sheila would become a recurring antagonist representing overly protective and censorious parenting. Cartman's mother was Leanne Cartman, who would be depicted as extremely promiscuous. Kenny's parents were Stuart and Carol McCormick, who were designed as poor and neglectful. Comedy Central ordered the pilot episode to be produced using the construction paper technique from the shorts. This decision served multiple purposes. Creating the pilot with real construction paper would demonstrate the show's handmade aesthetic authentically. It would prove Parker and Stone's commitment to the craft and vision. It would create a unique artifact that distinguished the pilot from future computer animated episodes. Most importantly, it would be a one-time special achievement before transitioning to computer animation for series production. Everyone involved understood that producing every episode with construction paper would be impossible. The production time required would make a weekly series completely unfeasible. A single 22-minute episode required months of work using construction paper animation. A television series needed to produce episodes much faster to maintain a weekly broadcast schedule. However, creating one special pilot episode using real construction paper was achievable. The pilot would showcase the aesthetic and establish the show's visual identity before transitioning to faster production methods. The pilot episode was titled Cartman Gets an Anal Probe. The title alone generated concerns about whether the content would be acceptable for television broadcast. Production began in late 1996 and continued through early 1997. The story followed the four boys dealing with an alien abduction. The plot featured Cartman being abducted by aliens who performed medical experiments on him, including inserting an anal probe device. The aliens implanted a satellite device in Cartman's rectum that controlled his behavior. The boys tried to rescue Cartman and stop the aliens. Meanwhile, Kyle's baby brother, Ike, was also being targeted for abduction. The episode included multiple controversial elements beyond the anal probe storyline. The episode featured aliens performing experiments that referenced real alien abduction stories and conspiracy theories. The episode showed Kyle punting his baby brother Ike like a football, which would generate complaints about child abuse. The episode included profanity spoken by child characters. The episode featured crude humor involving bodily functions and sexual references. The script was approximately 20 pages of dialogue and action descriptions. Those 20 pages would require months of production work to translate into animated footage. The construction paper production process began with extensive character design work. Every character appearing in the pilot needed to be designed as construction paper cutouts. The main characters required dozens of different cutout versions to show various poses, expressions, and positions. Stan needed cutouts showing him standing still, walking, sitting at a desk, running, looking surprised, looking happy, looking sad, and every other position or expression that appeared in the script. Each distinct pose or expression required a separate physical cutout. Stan's face alone required multiple versions. Happy Stan needed a smiling mouth cutout. Sad Stan needed a frowning mouth. Surprised Stan needed a wide open mouth. Angry Stan needed a different mouth shape. The eyes also changed for different expressions. Each facial expression was created by combining different eye cutouts with different mouth cutouts. The modular system allowed animators to create many expressions from a limited number of pieces, but still required extensive preparation. Stan's body required versions showing different positions. Standing Stan had arms at his sides. Walking Stan had arms and legs in walking positions. Sitting Stan had legs bent and positioned as if sitting in a chair. Each body position was a separate cutout. Stan's clothing needed to be consistent across all versions. Stan wore a red jacket and blue jeans. These clothing colors remained the same on every Stan cutout to maintain character consistency. Kyle, Cartman, and Kenny received similar treatment. Each character needed dozens of cutout versions. Kyle wore a green jacket and orange pants. His distinctive Ushanka hat with ear flaps was a key visual element that appeared on every Kyle cutout. Cartman wore a red jacket and brown pants. His distinctive body shape, fat and round, differentiated him visually from the other boys. Kenny wore his orange parka that covered most of his face. Only Kenny's eyes were visible beneath the parka hood. Supporting characters also needed complete sets of cutouts. Chef appeared in the pilot and required multiple versions. Mr. Garrison appeared as the boys' teacher and needed cutouts for classroom scenes. Mr. Hat, the hand puppet that Mr. Garrison talked to, was a separate character requiring its own cutouts. Officer Barbrady appeared and needed designs. Wendy Testaberger appeared as Stan's crush, and needed cutouts. Every character visible on screen required physical construction, paper cutouts that animators would photograph. Background elements required extensive work. South Park Elementary School building was constructed from paper. The exterior of the school, showing the front entrance and surrounding grounds, was created using multiple layers of paper cutouts. The classroom interior where the boys attended school was built from paper. Desks, chairs, blackboards, and other classroom furnishings were all paper cutouts. The school bus that transported children was created from paper with separate pieces for the bus body, wheels, windows, and door. Houses were constructed from paper for residential scenes. The interiors of houses showing living rooms, kitchens, and bedrooms required multiple paper elements. Furniture, including sofas, chairs, tables, and beds, were all cutouts. Kitchen appliances, decorations, and other details were created from paper. Mountains in the background were paper cutouts positioned behind foreground elements. Trees were paper. Streetlights were paper. Every visual element appearing on screen was physical construction paper, photographed frame by frame. The color palette for the pilot was established during this design phase. South Park's distinctive color scheme features bright, saturated colors. The sky is bright blue. Snow is pure white. The boys wear bright red, green, blue, and orange jackets. The color choices were partly aesthetic and partly practical. Bright colors photographed well under animation stand lighting. The colors created visual clarity and made characters easy to distinguish. The simple, bold colors became a defining characteristic of South Park's visual style. The animation process began once all cutouts were prepared. Multiple animation stands were set up at the production facility. Each animation stand had the same basic configuration: a flat surface for positioning cutouts and a camera mounted above pointing downward. Professional animation lights were positioned around each stand to provide even illumination without harsh shadows. The cameras were high-quality models capable of taking single photographs precisely and consistently. Multiple animators worked simultaneously on different scenes to divide the enormous workload. One animator might be assigned all classroom scenes. That animator would position teacher and student cutouts on the animation stand and photograph them frame by frame for every classroom scene in the episode. Another animator worked on outdoor scenes showing the boys walking around South Park. A third animator handled scenes with the aliens and the abduction sequences. The animation process for each scene followed identical procedures. The animator read the script and storyboards to understand what happened in the scene. The animator assembled all the character cutouts needed. The animator positioned the characters on the animation stand according to the first frame of the scene. The animator checked the camera viewfinder to ensure composition was correct. The animator photographed the frame. The animator then moved the character cutout slightly to show the next moment of movement. This might mean moving a character's arm forward slightly to show walking motion, or changing a mouth position to match dialogue. The animator photographed the second frame. The animator moved cutouts again for the third frame and photographed. This process repeated for every frame of the scene. A 10-second scene at 12 frames per second required 120 individual photographs. Each photograph required positioning, cutouts, checking composition, and clicking the camera shutter. The physical repetition was exhausting. Animators worked for hours positioning tiny paper pieces and taking photographs. Lip sync presented special challenges. When characters spoke dialogue, their mouths needed to move in ways that roughly synchronized with the recorded voices. The animators listened to the voice recordings and noted when specific words occurred. They photographed mouth positions that opened and closed in rhythm with the dialogue. Perfect synchronization was not required or expected, given South Park's crude aesthetic. However, mouths needed to move visibly when characters talked. The animators swapped mouth cutouts frequently during dialogue scenes to create this movement. A 22-minute episode at 12 frames per second required approximately 15,240 individual photographs. This number accounted for the full runtime, including opening credits, scenes, and ending credits. Some frames could be repeated when characters stood still or when backgrounds remained static. However, most frames required unique photographs showing new positions. The photographers took well over 15,000 individual photos during production. Multiple animators working full-time took approximately 4 to 5 months to complete photography for the pilot episode. The process began in late 1996 and continued through early 1997. The animators worked long hours positioning paper, photographing frames, and advancing scenes slowly. Progress was measured in seconds of completed animation per day. A productive day might yield 30 to 45 seconds of finished animation. Less productive days yielded only 15 to 20 seconds. The total 22-minute episode required approximately 120 days of aggregate animator labor. Technical problems complicated the production process regularly. Construction paper is fragile material that bends, tears, and wears out with handling. Character cutouts suffered damage during animation. Arms fell off body cutouts. Tiny pieces like fingers or facial features separated and got lost. The production team needed to create replacement cutouts constantly throughout filming. If a damaged stand cutout could not be repaired, a new identical stand cutout needed to be cut from construction paper and prepared. Lighting created ongoing challenges. The animation stand lights needed to illuminate paper cutouts evenly without creating harsh shadows that would appear in photographs. If lights were positioned too close to the animation surface, they created bright spots. If lights were too far away, the image appeared dim. The lighting setup required constant adjustment and monitoring. Shadows from cutout pieces could fall on other pieces and create unwanted dark areas in photographs. The camera needed to remain perfectly stable throughout production. Any camera movement between frames would create jerky shifts in the image. The camera was mounted securely to prevent accidental shifting. However, even small building vibrations or temperature changes could affect camera position microscopically. The animators checked camera position regularly and made adjustments when necessary. Maintaining perfect camera stability across thousands of photographs required vigilance and attention. Voice recording happened separately from animation during the pilot production. The voice actors recorded all their dialogue first. These recordings were then used as reference for animation timing. Isaac Hayes recorded Chef's dialogue and songs. Mary Kay Bergman recorded dialogue for female characters including Wendy and Stan's mother Sharon. Parker and Stone recorded dialogue for all the male characters including the 4 boys, Mr. Garrison, and others. The recording session took only a few hours since the voice cast was small. The recorded dialogue was transcribed and timed precisely. Sound engineers measured exactly when each word and syllable occurred in the recordings. This timing information was given to animators so they could synchronize mouth movements with dialogue. When Stan said a line of dialogue, the animator needed to photograph mouth movements that roughly matched when Stan's voice was speaking. This synchronization did not need to be perfect, but needed to be close enough that viewers perceived characters' mouths moving when they talked. The editing process began as animated sequences were completed. Individual scenes that had been photographed were developed as film or transferred to video. These completed scenes were assembled in sequence according to the script. The editor created the episode's overall structure by placing scenes in order. The voice recordings were synchronized with the animation during editing. Sound effects were added to enhance action and comedy. Music was composed and recorded separately, then added to the soundtrack. The editing process took several additional weeks after animation photography was completed. The editor worked with Parker and Stone to refine pacing and timing. Scenes that ran too long were shortened. Transitions between scenes were adjusted. The opening credits were created showing the 4 boys riding the school bus to school while a theme song played. The ending credits were created, listing the production staff. All these elements were assembled into the final 22-minute pilot episode. Comedy Central executives reviewed rough cuts of the pilot as production progressed. Network executives visited the production facility to see animation in progress. They watched completed scenes before the full episode was finished. The executives were impressed with what they saw. The construction paper aesthetic was unique and memorable. The animation had distinctive charm despite its crudeness. The humor was offensive and shocking in ways that would generate attention and publicity. The pilot episode was finished in summer 1997 after approximately 5 to 6 months of total production time from start to finish. The production team was exhausted from months of tedious work. The construction paper technique had nearly broken everyone involved. Positioning tiny paper pieces and photographing thousands of frames had been grueling. However, they had created something unique and special. Cartman Gets an Anal Probe looked like nothing else on television. Comedy Central was thrilled with the completed pilot. The network immediately committed to ordering a full season of South Park. The pilot demonstrated that the concept worked and could sustain a series. However, Comedy Central and Parker and Stone agreed that future episodes could not be produced using construction paper. The production time was completely unsustainable for a weekly series. The show needed to transition to computer animation immediately. The shift to computer animation began during summer 1997 while the pilot was being finished. Parker and Stone worked with animation studios and software developers to create digital versions of the construction paper aesthetic. The animation team learned to use Power Animator software, which was later replaced by Maya. Digital cutouts were created that mimicked the look of paper characters. The digital animation process allowed much faster production while maintaining the handmade visual style established by the pilot. Comedy Central scheduled the pilot to premiere on the 13th of August 1997. However, the network decided to air a special sneak preview before the official premiere. Cartman Gets an Anal Probe was shown as a preview on the 8th of August 1997, immediately after the Kids' Choice Awards. This preview gave audiences an early look at South Park 5 days before the series premiere. The preview generated immediate buzz and controversy. The response to the preview was intensely divided. Some viewers loved the crude humor and distinctive animation style. Others were horrified and offended by the content. The anal probe storyline shocked people. The profanity from child characters generated outrage. Parents groups began organizing complaints before the series officially premiered. The controversy created exactly the publicity Comedy Central wanted. Media outlets wrote articles about the shocking new animated show. The attention drove viewership for the official premiere. The official series premiere occurred on the 13th of August 1997 at 10:00 p.m. on Comedy Central. Cartman Gets an Anal Probe aired as the first episode of South Park. The episode attracted 980,000 viewers for its premiere broadcast. This was considered very strong viewership for a cable network original series. The ratings exceeded Comedy Central's expectations significantly. The network had hoped for maybe 500,000 viewers. Nearly 1 million viewers tuning in represented a major success. Viewers who watched the premiere had no idea they were seeing something historically significant in terms of production technique. The episode appeared to be standard animation. Most viewers assumed future episodes would use the same construction paper method. They did not know that Cartman Gets an Anal Probe was the only episode ever created using real construction paper. Comedy Central and Parker and Stone did not immediately reveal this fact publicly. The production technique remained somewhat mysterious during the first season. The construction paper pilot became valuable as a unique artifact in television animation history. Cartman Gets an Anal Probe represented one of the last times a major television production used traditional stop-motion techniques for a full episode. Most animated shows had transitioned to digital production by the mid-1990s. South Park used construction paper for one episode as both a creative choice and a tribute to traditional animation. The pilot demonstrated that handmade animation could still be effective even in the digital age. The pilot also demonstrated Parker and Stone's extraordinary commitment to their creative vision. They could have pitched South Park with computer animation from the beginning. They chose to create one episode the extremely difficult way to prove the aesthetic worked authentically. The decision showed dedication to craft and unwillingness to compromise on artistic vision. The construction paper pilot became a point of pride for everyone involved in creating it. Years later, Parker and Stone discussed the pilot production in various interviews. Parker stated in a 2011 interview with Wired magazine that creating the pilot with construction paper was insane and nearly killed us. He described the process as tedious beyond belief. Stone noted in the same interview that they never wanted to touch construction paper again after finishing the pilot. Both creators expressed relief that computer animation made series production feasible. However, they also acknowledged that the construction paper pilot was essential to South Park's success. The unique handmade quality of that first episode established the show's visual identity in viewers' minds. Even though later episodes were computer animated, they maintained the construction paper aesthetic. The pilot's look became permanently associated with South Park. Viewers remembered the distinctive crude animation style. The pilot created brand recognition and visual identity that defined the show. The construction paper origins remained part of South Park's mythology throughout its run. The show occasionally referenced its production history in later episodes. The episode Free Hat in Season 6 featured a storyline about digitally altering classic films and media. The episode included jokes about replacing practical effects with computer graphics. The references acknowledged South Park's own transition from construction paper to computer animation. Some fans preferred the construction paper pilot to later computer-animated episodes. Online discussions debated whether the show lost something by abandoning physical animation. Fan sites archived information about the pilot's production methods. Some fans attempted to recreate construction paper South Park animation as tribute projects. The pilot's unique production technique became legendary among the fan community. Comedy Central kept the construction paper pilot in regular rotation during South Park's first season. The episode aired repeatedly as part of the network's programming schedule. New viewers discovered South Park through reruns of the pilot. The episode attracted consistently strong ratings whenever it aired. Comedy Central recognized that the pilot was special and valuable beyond typical episode replays. The production process that created Cartman Gets an Anal Probe influenced how Parker and Stone approached television animation forever. They learned that speed and efficiency mattered more than visual polish for comedy. The construction paper experience taught them to prioritize writing and humor over technical sophistication. These lessons shaped South Park's eventual evolution toward the rapid 6-day production schedule that would define later seasons. The pilot episode remains available through streaming platforms and home video releases. Viewers can watch Cartman Gets an Anal Probe and see the construction paper animation that launched South Park. The episode looks noticeably different from later computer animated episodes. The animation is jerkier and cruder. The movements are more mechanical. However, the episode contains the DNA of everything South Park would become. The humor, the characters, the crude sensibility, and the willingness to offend all originated in that construction paper pilot. South Park premiered in August 1997 with construction paper animation and immediately became a cultural phenomenon. The show's handmade origins remained central to its identity, even after transitioning to computer production. The construction paper aesthetic that began as a practical necessity for student films became a defining characteristic of one of the most successful and long-running animated series in television history. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on. South Park was almost canceled after its first season. When South Park premiered in August 1997, the show immediately generated controversy that exceeded anything Comedy Central had previously experienced with any program in the network's history. The network received thousands of complaint letters within the first month of broadcast. Parent organizations across the United States demanded the show be removed from television immediately. Major advertisers threatened to withdraw funding and cancel their commercial contracts. Comedy Central executives faced intense pressure from multiple directions to cancel South Park before it completed its first season. The show's survival was genuinely uncertain throughout late 1997 and early 1998 as financial losses mounted and protests escalated. The controversy began immediately with the premiere episode, Cartman Gets an Anal Probe. The episode aired on the 13th of August 1997 at 10 p.m. on Comedy Central. The content included crude language that had never been heard on television from child characters. The episode featured sexual references involving elementary school children. The episode depicted violence, including a character being struck by a vehicle. The central plot involved aliens performing medical experiments on Cartman, including inserting an anal probe device into his rectum. This storyline was explicit about the sexual nature of the probe. The aliens implanted a satellite device in Cartman's body through his anus. The probe controlled Cartman's behavior and caused him to sing and dance involuntarily. The episode also featured Kyle's baby brother Ike being punted like a football. Kyle kicked his baby brother through the air repeatedly throughout the episode. The punting was treated as comedy rather than child abuse. The visual of a toddler being kicked and flying through the air generated immediate outrage from child welfare advocates. The episode included characters using profanity, including words like shit, ass, and hell. These words were spoken casually by 8-year-old characters as part of normal dialogue. Viewers who watched the premiere had extremely strong reactions within minutes of the broadcast beginning. Some viewers appreciated the boundary-pushing comedy and distinctive style. These viewers found the show hilarious and refreshing. However, many other viewers were horrified that such content was being broadcast on television. Complaint calls to Comedy Central began during the broadcast itself. The network's switchboard received hundreds of calls from outraged viewers while the episode was still airing. The calls continued throughout the night and into the next day. By the end of the week following the premiere, Comedy Central had received over 1,000 formal written complaints about Cartman Gets an Anal Probe. The complaints came through mail, fax, and email. Viewers described the episode as disgusting, immoral, inappropriate, and dangerous. Many complaints specifically objected to the anal probe storyline as sexually explicit content involving a child character. Others objected to the violence against Ike. The profanity generated numerous complaints. Parents wrote angry letters stating they had been watching television with their children when South Park came on, and they were shocked by the content. The Parents Television Council identified South Park as dangerous content within days of the premiere. The Parents Television Council had been founded in 1995 by L. Brent Bozell III, a conservative media critic and political activist. Bozell had previously founded the Media Research Center, an organization that monitored media for liberal bias. The Parents Television Council was designed specifically to pressure advertisers to withdraw from television programs the organization deemed harmful to families and children. Bozell issued a public statement on the 15th of August 1997, just 2 days after South Park premiered. The statement called South Park the crudest, most offensive program on television. The statement described the premiere episode in explicit detail, highlighting the anal probe storyline, the profanity, and the violence. Bozell argued that South Park normalized vulgarity and sexual content for young viewers. The statement called on Comedy Central to cancel the show immediately before additional episodes could air. The statement urged parents to contact their cable providers and demand that Comedy Central be removed from basic cable packages or that South Park be blocked from airing. The Parents Television Council immediately launched a coordinated campaign against South Park advertisers. The organization maintained extensive databases of which companies purchased advertising time during which television programs. The Parents Television Council had staff members who monitored broadcasts and recorded all commercials that aired during South Park. Within 1 week of the premiere, the organization had compiled a complete list of every company that had advertised during Cartman Gets an Anal Probe. The Parents Television Council sent formal letters to every advertiser on this list. The letters were sent to corporate headquarters addressed to chief executive officers and marketing directors. The letters described South Park's content in explicit detail. The letters included transcripts of profanity spoken during the episode. The letters described the anal probe storyline with emphasis on the sexual nature of the content. The letters warned that companies associated with South Park would face boycotts from Parents Television Council members and supporters. The letters outlined specific consequences for companies that continued advertising on South Park. The Parents Television Council threatened to publish the names of South Park advertisers in newspapers and on the organization's website so that members could identify which companies to boycott. The organization claimed to represent millions of American families who would refuse to purchase products from companies supporting immoral television content. The letters urged immediate withdrawal of all advertising from South Park. Several major corporations responded to this pressure within days of receiving the letters. According to reports published in Advertising Age and Variety in September 1997, at least a dozen major advertisers withdrew their commercials from South Park time slots during the first few weeks of broadcast. The companies that withdrew included several major food manufacturers whose products were marketed primarily to families with children. General Mills pulled advertising for breakfast cereals, Kraft Foods withdrew commercials. Several major automotive brands, including Ford and General Motors, pulled advertisements. Consumer products companies also withdrew from South Park. Procter & Gamble removed commercials for household products. Johnson & Johnson pulled pharmaceutical advertising. These companies did not want their family-friendly brands associated with controversial adult content. The advertisers moved their commercials to other Comedy Central programs or to different networks entirely. The companies maintained relationships with Comedy Central but specifically avoided South Park time slots. The advertising exodus created an immediate and serious financial crisis for Comedy Central. The network depended almost entirely on advertising revenue to fund operations and pay for programming. South Park time slots had initially sold for premium rates because the show was new and generating significant buzz. Advertisers had been willing to pay high prices to reach South Park's audience during the first week of broadcast. However, as advertisers withdrew in response to the Parents Television Council campaign, Comedy Central struggled to fill the available commercial time. The network was forced to reduce advertising rates significantly to attract replacement advertisers willing to accept the controversy. Commercial time that had sold for $20,000 per 30-second spot during the premiere was being offered at $10,000 or less by September 1997. The revenue from South Park decreased by approximately 30 to 40% within the first month of broadcast. Comedy Central was earning substantially less money from its highest-rated show than from less popular programs that did not generate controversy. Doug Herzog served as president of Comedy Central in 1997. Herzog had held this position since 1995 after previously working at MTV. He was responsible for all programming decisions and overall network strategy. Herzog reported to MTV Network's leadership and was accountable for Comedy Central's financial performance. Herzog faced enormous pressure regarding South Park from multiple directions simultaneously. MTV Network's executives wanted to protect Comedy Central's revenue and profitability. They pressured Herzog to either fix the advertising problem or cancel the show. Advertisers demanded changes to South Park's content as a condition for continuing to purchase commercial time. Advertising executives called Herzog directly to complain about the show. They suggested that Comedy Central should enforce content standards that would make South Park acceptable for family viewing. Several advertisers specifically demanded that profanity be eliminated, that sexual content be removed, and that the overall tone be made less offensive. Parent organizations continued escalating their campaigns throughout August and September 1997. The Parents Television Council organized its members to call Comedy Central directly and demand cancellation. The network's customer service lines were overwhelmed with complaint calls. Herzog received hundreds of letters personally from parents describing South Park as dangerous to children and demanding the show be canceled. However, Herzog also recognized that South Park was succeeding in important ways that mattered for Comedy Central's long-term viability. The show was attracting record viewership for the network. The premiere, episode's 980,000 viewers, represented the highest-rated program in Comedy Central history. Subsequent episodes maintained strong viewership. The second episode, Weight Gain 4000, attracted over 1.2 million viewers on the 20th of August 1997. The third episode, Volcano, attracted 1.5 million viewers. The audience was growing rather than shrinking despite the controversy. The demographic composition of South Park's audience was particularly valuable. The show attracted primarily male viewers aged 18 to 34, which was one of the most sought-after demographics in television advertising. This demographic was notoriously difficult to reach through traditional television. Young adult males watched less television than other demographics and were selective about programming. South Park was successfully attracting and holding this valuable audience week after week. Herzog also observed that South Park was creating cultural impact and generating media attention that benefited Comedy Central's overall brand recognition. The show was being discussed in newspapers, magazines, and on television news programs. Major publications including the New York Times, the Washington Post, USA Today, Entertainment Weekly, Rolling Stone, and Newsweek had published articles about South Park within the first month of broadcast. This media coverage provided free publicity worth millions of dollars. People who had never heard of Comedy Central now knew the network existed because of South Park. The second episode, Weight Gain 4000, increased controversy significantly beyond the premiere. The episode aired on the 20th of August 1997, exactly 1 week after the premiere. The plot involved Cartman winning a national essay contest and being selected to meet television personality Kathy Lee Gifford when she visited South Park. Meanwhile, Mr. Garrison planned to assassinate Gifford during her visit because of a grudge from high school. The episode featured extensive sequences showing Mr. Garrison preparing to commit murder, including obtaining a rifle and practicing shooting. The episode depicted graphic violence, including Mr. Garrison shooting at targets. The episode included a sequence where Mr. Garrison hid in a book depository building with a rifle, waiting for Gifford to appear, directly referencing the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. The episode featured profanity and crude humor throughout. The episode climaxed with Mr. Garrison attempting to shoot Gifford, but missing and hitting Kenny, instead killing him. Kathy Lee. Gifford's representatives contacted Comedy Central on the 21st of August 1997, 1 day after the episode aired. The representatives sent a formal cease and desist letter to the network. The letter complained that Gifford had been depicted in an episode involving assassination and violence without her consent. Gifford had not been consulted about her appearance in South Park. She had not given permission for her name, image, or likeness to be used. The letter threatened legal action if Gifford appeared in future South Park episodes without permission. Comedy Central's legal department reviewed the episode carefully after receiving the complaint. The network's lawyers determined that the depiction likely fell under fair use protections for parody and satire. Public figures like Gifford had less protection against satirical depictions than private citizens. The portrayal was clearly fictional parody rather than factual defamation. However, the legal threat added to Comedy Central's mounting problems with the show, even though the network believed it would prevail if the matter went to court. Additional parent organizations joined the Parents Television Council in demanding South Park's cancellation during late August and September 1997. The American Family Association issued public statements condemning South Park on the 25th of August 1997. The American Family Association was a Christian conservative organization founded in 1977 by Donald Wildmon. The group promoted traditional family values and opposed media content it considered immoral or destructive to families. The American Family Association called South Park an assault on decency and Christian values. The organization issued a statement describing the show as deliberately offensive to religious believers and traditional families. The statement urged members to contact Comedy Central and demand immediate cancellation. The American Family Association organized letter-writing campaigns where members sent pre-written complaint letters to Comedy Central headquarters. The network received thousands of these form letters during September 1997. The American Family Association also contacted cable providers directly and requested that South Park be blocked from airing or that Comedy Central be removed from basic cable packages. Several cable companies received hundreds of calls from subscribers demanding action against South Park. Some cable providers considered moving Comedy Central to premium tiers, where subscribers would have to pay extra to receive the channel. This would dramatically reduce South Park's potential audience and harm Comedy Central's business significantly. Religious groups organized physical protests outside Comedy Central's offices during September 1997. Approximately 50 protesters gathered outside MTV Network's headquarters in New York on the 2nd of September 1997. The protesters came from various Christian churches in the New York area. They carried signs with messages including "Cancel South Park," "Protect Our Children," "Decency Matters," and "Stop Promoting Sin." The protesters distributed informational leaflets describing South Park's offensive content to pedestrians passing by. The demonstration lasted approximately 4 hours during the afternoon of the 2nd of September. Media outlets covered the protest with television news, crews filming the protesters and interviewing organizers. Local New York news programs broadcast footage of the protests during their evening news broadcasts. The coverage spread awareness of the South Park controversy to audiences who had not previously heard about the show. The publicity generated by the protests actually benefited South Park by attracting curious viewers who wanted to see what was causing such strong reactions. By early September 1997, Comedy Central had received over 5,000 formal, written complaints about South Park. This number included letters, faxes, and emails sent to the network. The volume of complaints exceeded anything Comedy Central had experienced with any previous program. The network employed a small customer service staff who processed viewer feedback. The staff was overwhelmed trying to respond to the enormous volume of South Park complaints. The company had to assign additional employees to help process the backlog. The complaint letters described South Park using remarkably similar language. Many letters called the show disgusting, immoral, offensive, inappropriate for television, and dangerous to children. The letters frequently demanded immediate cancellation. Some letters threatened boycotts of Comedy Central and all advertisers associated with the show. A significant number of letters came from organized campaigns where advocacy groups provided template letters that members copied and sent. The third episode, Big Gay Al's Big Gay Boat Ride, aired on the 3rd of September 1997. This episode generated even more intense controversy than the previous episodes because it dealt with homosexuality. The plot involved Stan's dog Sparky being gay. Stan was embarrassed and upset that his dog exhibited homosexual behavior. The boys attempted to make Sparky heterosexual through various methods. Eventually, Stan took Sparky to Big Gay Al's Big Gay Animal Sanctuary, where gay animals lived. Big Gay Al was an openly and flamboyantly gay character who ran the sanctuary. The character spoke with an exaggerated, effeminate voice. Big Gay Al wore colorful clothing and exhibited stereotypical gay mannerisms. The character took Stan on a boat ride through the sanctuary showing various gay animals. The episode included a musical number where Big Gay Al sang a song about accepting homosexuality titled I'm Super. The episode's message appeared to be pro-acceptance of homosexuality. However, the portrayal of Big Gay Al as an extreme stereotype generated objections from multiple directions. Conservative religious organizations objected strenuously to Big Gay Al's Big Gay Boat Ride. These groups argued that the episode promoted homosexuality to children. They claimed the episode normalized gay relationships and suggested that homosexuality was acceptable. The American Family Association issued an emergency alert to members on the 4th of September, 1997, one day after the episode aired. The alert described the episode as pro-homosexual propaganda targeted at children. The organization demanded that Comedy Central never rebroadcast the episode. Focus on the Family, another conservative Christian organization, issued similar statements condemning the episode. James Dobson, the founder of Focus on the Family, mentioned South Park specifically in a radio broadcast on the 8th of September 1997. Dobson called the show an example of how far television has fallen from decent standards. He urged listeners to contact their cable providers and request that South Park be removed from their homes. However, some LGBTQ advocacy groups also objected to Big Gay Al's Big Gay Boat Ride despite the episode's ostensibly pro-acceptance message. The Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, GLAAD, issued a statement expressing concern about the stereotypical portrayal of the Big Gay Al character. The statement noted that the character exhibited exaggerated stereotypical gay mannerisms, including the effeminate voice and flamboyant behavior. GLAAD argued that such stereotypical portrayals reinforced negative stereotypes about gay men, even when the show's message appeared supportive. Some gay rights advocates defended the episode while others criticized it. The response from LGBTQ communities was divided. Some felt that any visibility for gay characters on television was positive, even if the portrayal was imperfect. Others argued that stereotypical caricatures caused more harm than good. This division among critics demonstrated the complexity of representation issues that South Park would continue grappling with throughout its run. The Parents Television Council intensified its campaign dramatically after Big Gay Al's Big Gay Boat Ride. The organization issued a new statement on the 5th of September 1997 that was more aggressive than previous releases. The statement called South Park a threat to American families and traditional values. The statement described the show as deliberately offensive content designed to corrupt children and undermine parental authority. The statement demanded that Comedy Central cancel South Park immediately or face coordinated nationwide boycotts. The Parents Television Council announced it would publish a comprehensive list of all South Park advertisers in major newspapers across the United States. The organization purchased advertising space in newspapers, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, and USA Today, to run full-page advertisements listing companies that advertise during South Park. The advertisements encouraged readers to contact these companies and demand they withdraw support from the show. The advertisements urged consumers to boycott products from companies that refused to stop advertising on South Park. The threat of organized nationwide boycotts published in major newspapers alarmed advertisers who had not yet withdrawn from South Park. Several additional major corporations pulled their commercials during the second week of September 1997 in response to the Parents Television Council's escalation. Pepsi withdrew advertising. McDonald's pulled commercials. Several pharmaceutical companies removed advertisements. These were major advertisers whose withdrawal significantly impacted Comedy Central's revenue. By mid-September 1997, approximately 30 to 35% of the advertising revenue from South Park time slots had disappeared. Comedy Central was earning substantially less money from South Park than projections had anticipated, despite the show's strong ratings. The network was struggling to replace the lost advertising income. Comedy Central's advertising sales department worked frantically to find new advertisers willing to accept the controversy and public backlash. The network approached companies that specifically targeted young male demographics and might be less concerned about family-friendly brand image. Beer manufacturers expressed interest in advertising during South Park. Anheuser-Busch and Miller Brewing Company purchased commercial time. The advertisements promoted Budweiser and Miller Lite to South Park's young male audience. However, beer advertising rates were lower than the family-oriented advertisers who had withdrawn. The network earned less revenue from beer commercials than from the previous advertisers. Video game companies agreed to purchase advertising during South Park. Nintendo, Sony PlayStation, and Electronic Arts ran commercials during the show. Video game advertising was appropriate for South Park's audience, but again paid lower rates than major consumer brands. Automotive brands, specifically marketing to younger buyers, purchased some commercial time. The network cobbled together enough advertising to fill time slots, but it significantly reduced revenue compared to the premiere. Doug Herzog held multiple emergency meetings with Comedy Central executives and MTV Network's leadership throughout September 1997. The financial situation was deteriorating. Advertising revenue had declined significantly and showed no signs of recovering. The controversy was generating negative publicity that affected Comedy Central's overall brand perception. Cable providers were receiving pressure from subscribers to remove Comedy Central or block South Park. Some cable companies were seriously considering moving Comedy Central to premium tiers. However, Herzog also reviewed comprehensive data showing South Park's success in metrics beyond advertising revenue. The show was averaging over 3 million viewers per episode by late September 1997. These viewership numbers represented the highest ratings for any Comedy Central original program in the network's 6-year history. The show was breaking records every week. The ratings were growing rather than shrinking despite all the controversy. The demographic data was particularly impressive. South Park was attracting male viewers aged 18 to 34 in unprecedented numbers for Comedy Central. This demographic represented exactly the audience that advertisers most wanted to reach. While some advertisers had withdrawn due to content concerns, the demographic data proved that South Park delivered access to valuable viewers. Herzog recognized that advertisers specifically targeting this demographic would eventually return once the initial controversy subsided. South Park was also creating measurable impact on cable subscription rates. Cable providers reported increased interest in packages that included Comedy Central specifically because customers wanted to watch South Park. Subscribers were calling cable companies asking which package included Comedy Central so they could watch South Park. Some customers were upgrading from basic cable to expanded packages to get Comedy Central. These new subscribers represented long-term revenue for cable providers. The cable providers shared some of this revenue with Comedy Central through carriage fees. Cable companies paid Comedy Central a small fee for every subscriber who received the channel. When more subscribers selected packages, including Comedy Central, the network earned more money from carriage fees. South Park was driving subscription growth that generated revenue independent of advertising. This additional revenue stream helped offset some of the advertising losses. The merchandising potential became apparent during September 1997. Retailers reported strong demand for unofficial South Park merchandise before any official licensing agreements existed. Unauthorized T-shirts featuring the characters appeared at mall kiosks and street vendors. The shirts sold extremely well. Unofficial posters were selling. People wanted South Park merchandise. Comedy Central recognized that official licensed merchandise could generate substantial revenue completely independent of advertising income. The network began negotiating licensing deals with toy manufacturers, clothing companies, poster companies, and other product makers during September and October 1997. These deals would allow officially licensed South Park merchandise to be produced and sold, with Comedy Central receiving royalty payments. The licensing revenue would compensate for some of the advertising losses. Merchandising could potentially become a more significant revenue source than advertising if the show remained popular. The cultural impact analysis showed that South Park was generating enormous amounts of free publicity for Comedy Central. The show was being discussed in major newspapers and magazines every week. Television news programs were doing segments about the South Park controversy. The media coverage was worth millions of dollars in advertising equivalency. Comedy Central could not have purchased this much publicity and awareness, even with enormous advertising budgets. South Park was making Comedy Central relevant and culturally significant in ways the network had never achieved previously. Before South Park, Comedy Central was a minor cable channel known primarily for reruns of Saturday Night Live. Most Americans had never heard of Comedy Central or did not know which channel number it occupied. South Park changed this situation dramatically. Suddenly, everyone knew about Comedy Central because of South Park. The network was being discussed on national news programs and in major publications. The show was becoming a phenomenon on college campuses across America. Students were quoting lines from episodes. South Park characters were appearing in student newspapers and campus publications. College students were organizing viewing parties where groups gathered to watch new episodes together. The college demographic was particularly valuable because these were future high-income earners who would remember South Park fondly for decades. Herzog needed to decide whether to renew South Park for a second season. Comedy Central had ordered 13 episodes for season 1. The network had contractual obligations to broadcast all 13 episodes that had been ordered and produced. However, the network retained the option not to renew for season 2. Herzog could cancel South Park after one season and avoid ongoing controversy, advertiser pressure, and public complaints. Alternatively, Herzog could renew the show and commit Comedy Central to supporting controversial content despite significant costs. The fourth episode, Volcano, aired on the 20th of August 1997 as a double premiere, Night with Weight Gain 4000. Volcano featured the boys going hunting with Uncle Jimbo and Ned. The episode included extensive gun violence and animal killing. Scuzzlebutt, a bizarre monster made of various animal parts, appeared in the episode. The episode was less controversial than others because the content was primarily action and adventure, rather than sexual or scatological. However, gun violence generated some complaints from anti-gun advocates. The fifth episode, An Elephant Makes Love to a Pig, aired on the 10th of September 1997. The episode featured genetic engineering experiments. Kyle's elephant was crossbred with Cartman's pig in an attempt to create a pot-bellied elephant. The episode title itself was sexually suggestive. The episode included crude humor about animal reproduction. The episode was moderately controversial, but less so than Big Gay Al's Big Gay Boat Ride. The sixth episode, Death, aired on the 17th of September 1997. This episode featured Cartman's grandmother attempting to kill him because he was overweight, and she believed death was better than being fat. The episode dealt with euthanasia and assisted suicide. The episode also featured a subplot about parents protesting the fictional cartoon show, Terrence and Philip for being offensive. This subplot satirized the real protests against South Park. The episode was clever meta-commentary on the show's own controversy. The 7th episode, Pink Eye, aired on the 29th of October, 1997 as a Halloween episode. This episode featured a zombie outbreak in South Park. Kenny died at the beginning of the episode and was buried. A can of Worcestershire sauce spilled on Kenny's corpse and reanimated him as a zombie. Zombie Kenny bit other characters and spread the zombie infection. The episode featured graphic violence, including Kenny's head being chainsawed off. The episode was gory but appropriate for Halloween horror themes. The 8th episode, Starvin' Marvin, aired on the 19th of November, 1997. The episode dealt with world hunger and featured an Ethiopian child named Starvin' Marvin who came to South Park. The episode satirized charity organizations and celebrity activism. The episode was relatively mild in controversy compared to earlier episodes. However, some critics objected to the portrayal of Ethiopian starvation as comedy material. The 9th episode, Mr. Hanky, the Christmas Pooh, aired on the 17th of December, 1997. This episode became the most controversial and most complained about episode of Season 1. The episode featured a character who was literally a piece of fecal matter wearing a Santa hat. Mr. Hanky appeared to children during the Christmas season. The character sang Christmas songs and danced. The character spoke with a cheerful voice and exhibited friendly personality. The concept of a talking piece of excrement offended religious groups who viewed it as mocking Christmas and Christian traditions. Parents objected to children's programming, featuring feces, as a main character. The episode became a cultural flashpoint. Comedy Central received over 2,000 complaint letters specifically about Mr. Hanky within 1 week of broadcast. The letters described the episode as disgusting, blasphemous, offensive, and traumatizing for children who watched. Religious leaders wrote letters condemning Mr. Hanky. Ministers and priests mentioned the episode in sermons as an example of declining moral standards in American media. Catholic League President William Donahue issued a statement calling the episode an assault on Christmas and Christian values. Donahue demanded Comedy Central apologize and never rebroadcast the episode. However, Mr. Hanky also generated enormously positive responses from South Park's core audience. College students loved the episode and the character. The character became immediately popular on campuses across America. Students created Mr. Hanky costumes for Christmas parties. Students sang Mr. Hanky's song, Mr. Hanky the Christmas Pooh, at holiday gatherings. The episode demonstrated South Park's ability to create characters and moments that resonated powerfully with its target audience while simultaneously offending others. The 10th episode, Damien, aired on the 4th of February 1998. This episode featured the son of Satan arriving at South Park Elementary. The episode included religious themes about Satan and hell. The episode was controversial among religious viewers, but less so than Mr. Hanky. The 11th episode, Tom's Rhinoplasty, aired on the 11th of February, 1998. This episode featured Mr. Garrison getting cosmetic surgery to become more attractive. The episode included sexual content and crude humor about physical appearance. The episode generated moderate controversy. The 12th episode, Make Us Streisand, aired on the 18th of February, 1998. This episode featured Barbara Streisand transforming into a giant robot monster who attacked South Park. The episode satirized celebrity egos and entertainment industry pretensions. Streisand's representatives complained about the portrayal but took no legal action. The 13th and final episode of Season 1 was Cartman's Mom is a Dirty Slut. The episode aired on the 25th of February, 1998. The episode revealed that Cartman's mother, Leanne, had sexual relationships with numerous men in South Park. The episode asked who Cartman's father was and ended on a cliffhanger. The answer would not be revealed until Season 2. The cliffhanger generated anticipation for the second season and kept audiences interested during the hiatus between seasons. Doug Herzog made his final decision about renewing South Park in early October 1997 before all of Season 1 had aired. Comedy Central announced the renewal publicly on the 15th of October 1997. The network ordered 18 episodes for Season 2, which was 5 more episodes than Season 1. Herzog issued a public statement defending the renewal decision. The statement defended South Park as important social satire that provoked thought and discussion. The statement emphasized that South Park was intended for adult viewers and that parents were responsible for monitoring what their children watched. The statement noted that Comedy Central broadcast South Park at 10:40 Yefors Worlear Reavroturoles Wait 12 p.m., well after the 8 p.m. watershed hour when family viewing was expected to end. The statement argued that adults should be free to watch provocative content late at night without censorship. Herzog told trade publications that Comedy Central would not censor Parker and Stone's creative vision. The network committed to supporting the show despite ongoing controversy and financial challenges. The Parents Television Council immediately condemned the renewal decision. Bozell issued a statement on the 16th of October 1997 calling Comedy Central irresponsible and morally bankrupt. The statement accused the network of prioritizing profit over decency. The organization announced it would intensify campaigns against South Park advertisers. The Parents Television Council created a dedicated website listing every company that advertised during South Park broadcasts. The website published corporate contact information so members could easily file complaints with advertisers. Several religious organizations escalated their activities after the renewal announcement. The Catholic League organized protests at MTV Network's offices on the 3rd of November 1997. Approximately 75 protesters demonstrated outside the building in New York. The protesters prayed, sang hymns, and carried signs demanding South Park be canceled. The demonstration received local and national media coverage. The American Family Association launched a petition drive collecting signatures demanding South Park's cancellation. The organization gathered over 100,000 signatures on petitions that were delivered to Comedy Central headquarters in December 1997. The petitions were presented during a media event designed to generate publicity. However, the petitions had no binding effect, and Comedy Central ignored them. Protestant evangelical groups joined the campaigns. Jerry Falwell mentioned South Park in a speech on the 18th of November, 1997 at Liberty University. Falwell called the show evidence of moral decay in American culture. Pat Robertson discussed South Park on the 700 Club television program on the 2nd of December, 97. Robertson called the show an attack on Christian values and traditional families. The controversy escalated further in November and December 1997. Approximately 200 protesters demonstrated outside MTV Network's headquarters in New York on the 5th of December 1997. This was the largest protest yet organized against South Park. The protesters represented multiple religious organizations, including the Catholic League, American Family Association, and various Protestant churches. Police were called to manage the crowd and ensure the demonstration remained peaceful. The demonstration lasted several hours. Protesters carried signs, chanted slogans, and sang religious songs. Media outlets covered the protest extensively. Local news programs broadcast footage showing the large crowd of protesters. National news programs, including CNN, mentioned the South Park protests in their broadcasts. The coverage generated additional attention for South Park and likely attracted new viewers curious to see what was causing such intense reactions. Season 1 concluded in February 1998 with Cartman's Mom is a Dirty Slut. The season had survived despite enormous pressure to cancel. Comedy Central had lost significant advertising revenue but gained cultural relevance and brand awareness. South Park had become one of the most talked about shows on television. The controversy had not killed the show. Instead, the controversy had made South Park more successful and more prominent in American popular culture. The near cancellation during Season 1 became a defining moment that proved the show could withstand outside pressure and emerge stronger. Comedy Central demonstrated willingness to support controversial content when that content delivered valuable audiences. Parker and Stone maintained creative control and refused to compromise their vision. The battles fought during Season 1 established precedents that would protect South Park for the next 2.5 decades. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, Kenny's repeated deaths and resurrections have a canonical explanation. For years, viewers watched Kenny McCormick die in nearly every episode of South Park and return alive the next episode with no explanation provided by the show. The deaths became a defining running gag that established South Park's irreverent approach to continuity and consequences. Kenny was killed by vehicles, animals, falls, explosions, electrocution, disease, drowning, and countless other methods across the first 5 seasons. Each death was followed by Stan saying, "Oh my God, they killed Kenny," and Kyle responding, "You bastards." This exchange became one of the most recognizable catchphrases in television history and was repeated with minor variations in approximately 80 episodes. However, the show never explained why Kenny died constantly or how he kept returning to life despite these deaths. The pattern continued for 13 seasons before South Park finally revealed the complete mythology behind Kenny's immortality in Season 14 through a multi-episode storyline involving his superhero alter ego Mysterion. The pattern of Kenny's deaths began in the very first episode. Cartman Gets an Anal Probe, which aired on the 13th of August 1997, featured Kenny being killed when a police car struck him while he stood in the street. Officer Barbrady was driving the police car and did not notice hitting Kenny. The impact sent Kenny flying through the air. Kenny's body landed on the ground motionless. The other boys briefly acknowledged Kenny's death. Stan said, "Oh my God, they killed Kenny!" Kyle responded, "You bastards!" in an angry tone directed at no one in particular. The scene then immediately moved forward to the next plot point without further discussion of Kenny's death. The episode continued with the boys dealing with the alien situation. Kenny's death was not mentioned again. The episode ended without showing Kenny's funeral or his parents' reaction to his death. The next scene after Kenny's death simply showed the remaining 3 boys continuing their adventure as if Kenny had never existed. This casual treatment of death established that South Park would not follow normal dramatic conventions regarding character mortality. The second episode, Weight Gain 4000, which aired on the 20th of August 1997, opened with Kenny alive and well walking to the school bus stop with Stan, Kyle, and Cartman. The character appeared alongside the other boys with absolutely no explanation for how he had survived being hit by a police car in the previous episode. No character mentioned that Kenny had died. No character expressed surprise that Kenny was alive. Kenny participated in the episode's events as a normal living person with no indication anything unusual had occurred. The episode then killed Kenny, again at the end. A flagpole fell during the town celebration and crushed Kenny beneath it. Stan and Kyle delivered their catchphrase again. The episode ended with Kenny dead for the second time in 2 episodes. This established the permanent pattern. Kenny died, Stan and Kyle said their lines, the episode ended, and Kenny returned alive in the next episode without explanation. This formula repeated with remarkable consistency throughout seasons 1 through 5. Kenny died in approximately 80 out of the 98 episodes produced during this period. The percentage worked out to roughly 82% of all episodes. The show treated Kenny's deaths as disposable comedy rather than tragic events requiring serious treatment. No character mourned Kenny for more than a few seconds. The boys never attended Kenny's funeral despite him dying dozens of times. Kenny's parents, Stuart and Carol, rarely appeared to grieve their son's repeated deaths. On the few occasions when they did appear after Kenny died, they seemed mildly upset at most, but never devastated. The deaths became increasingly elaborate and creative as writers tried to find new and interesting ways to kill the character. The third episode, Volcano, which aired on the 20th of August 1997, had Kenny burned alive by lava during a volcanic eruption. The fourth episode, Big Gay Al's Big Gay Boat Ride, which aired on the 3rd of September 1997, had Kenny trampled by an entire football team. Players ran over Kenny repeatedly, leaving him flattened on the field. The fifth episode, An Elephant Makes Love to a Pig, which aired on the 10th of September 1997, featured Kenny's face being removed by a genetic experiment gone wrong. The sixth episode, Death, which aired on the 17th of September 1997, killed Kenny when he was struck and dragged by a New York subway train. The seventh episode, Pink Eye, which aired on the 29th of October 1997, featured one of the most elaborate Kenny death sequences. Kenny died at the beginning when a Russian space station fell from orbit and crushed him. His body was taken to a morgue. A jar of Worcestershire sauce fell and spilled on Kenny's corpse. The sauce reanimated Kenny as a zombie. Zombie Kenny spread infection throughout South Park. Eventually, Kyle's brother Ike chainsawed Kenny's head off to stop the zombie outbreak. Kenny technically died twice in this episode. The 8th episode, Starvin' Marvin, which aired on the 19th of November, 1997, killed Kenny when he was shot by a hunter who mistook him for a turkey. The 9th episode, Mr. Hanky, The Christmas Poo, which aired on the 17th of December, 1997, killed Kenny when he was trampled by a crowd rushing to see Mr. Hanky. The deaths continued every week with minimal variation in the formula. The show began acknowledging its own Kenny death pattern by season 3. Characters occasionally made meta-references to Kenny dying frequently. In the episode Rainforest Schmainforest, which aired on the 7th of April 1999, a character named Kelly commented, "Kenny always dies," when discussing the boys' adventures. The comment broke the fourth wall slightly by acknowledging the running gag. In the episode Cat Orgy, which aired on the 14th of July 1999, Cartman casually mentioned Kenny's frequent deaths as though it was common knowledge. However, despite the pattern being established, acknowledged, and continued for 5 full seasons, the show never explained why Kenny died and resurrected constantly. Viewers accepted this supernatural element as part of South Park's absurdist logic and lack of continuity. The show featured talking Christmas poo, aliens visiting regularly, Satan living in hell beneath the town, and various other impossible elements. Kenny's unexplained resurrection was just another bizarre aspect of South Park's universe that did not require logical explanation. Most viewers and critics assumed the deaths were simply a running joke with no deeper meaning. The comedy came from the contrast between the graphic deaths and the casual reactions. Parker and Stone were satirizing how animated characters never faced real consequences. Cartoons traditionally featured characters being crushed, exploded, or otherwise destroyed, who then appeared fine in the next scene. South Park was acknowledging this convention while pushing it to absurd extremes. The creators initially conceived Kenny's deaths exactly this way, according to multiple interviews. Parker told Entertainment Weekly in 2002 that they never intended to create mythology explaining the resurrections. The deaths were funny because they were absurd and consequence-free. Stone explained in the same interview that they decided to kill Kenny repeatedly because it subverted audience expectations. Viewers expected main characters to be safe. Killing Kenny every week was shocking initially and then became comforting routine. Parker stated in a 2004 Rolling Stone interview that Kenny's deaths were partially inspired by memories from elementary school. Parker remembered a kid who missed school frequently for various reasons. Parker and Stone decided instead of having a character who was absent frequently, they would kill him and bring him back. The morbid twist made the concept funnier than simple absence. The pattern continued through season 5 without explanation. However, by this point, Parker and Stone had grown tired of the Kenny death formula, according to interviews published in late 2001. They felt the gag had become stale and predictable. Viewers expected Kenny to die in every episode. The deaths were no longer surprising. Finding new creative ways to kill Kenny had become a burden on the writing process rather than a source of creativity. The creators wanted to do something unexpected with the character. The decision was made to kill Kenny permanently and remove him from the show. The episode Kenny Dies aired on the 5th of December 2001 during season 5. This episode treated Kenny's death seriously for the first time in the Pro series history. Kenny was diagnosed with a terminal muscular disease that was never specifically named but appeared similar to muscular dystrophy based on the symptoms shown. Kenny spent most of the episode in a hospital bed, dying slowly over several days. The episode's tone was dramatically different from the comedy deaths in previous episodes. Kenny Dies featured genuine emotional scenes of the boys confronting mortality for the first time. Stan could not bring himself to enter Kenny's hospital room initially because seeing his friend dying was too painful. Kyle visited Kenny regularly and tried to maintain hope that Kenny would recover, even though both of them knew Kenny was dying. Cartman appeared genuinely upset about losing Kenny, which was uncharacteristic for the selfish character. The episode showed Kenny deteriorating physically. His face became gaunt, his body weakened, he could barely speak. The disease progression was depicted realistically rather than comically. The episode ended with Kenny dying in his hospital bed, while Stan finally worked up the courage to visit. Stan, Kyle, and Cartman were present for Kenny's death. The moment was treated with genuine pathos and sadness rather than comedy. No one said, "Oh my God, they killed Kenny," because Kenny died from disease rather than violence. Kenny's funeral was shown in the following episode. The boys attended the funeral service wearing black clothing. Kenny was buried in a cemetery. Characters grieved his death. The funeral was treated seriously. Kenny remained dead at the end of the episode. This marked the first time Kenny stayed dead at the conclusion of an episode. The death appeared to be permanent. Kenny remained dead for the entirety of Season 6, which aired from March through November 2002. The character did not appear in any of the 17 episodes produced during Season 6. The show replaced Kenny with Butters Stotch in the main group of boys. Butters had appeared as a background character since Season 1, but had never been a main character. Butters became the fourth member of the core group alongside Stan, Kyle, and Cartman. Butters had a completely different personality from Kenny. Butters was naive, innocent, and easily manipulated. Butters spoke frequently and expressed his thoughts openly, unlike Kenny, whose speech was always muffled. Butters came from a middle-class family with two parents, unlike Kenny's poor family. The character dynamics changed significantly with Butters instead of Kenny. The show explored new comedic possibilities with this different character configuration. The show also introduced Tweak as a major character during Kenny's absence. Tweak was a nervous, hyperactive boy who drank excessive amounts of coffee and was constantly anxious and twitching. Tweak joined the main cast for several episodes during Season 6. Parker and Stone were experimenting with different character combinations to determine whether South Park could function without Kenny permanently. Parker and Stone initially intended for Kenny to remain dead permanently, according to interviews from 2002. The creators wanted to prove that South Park could evolve beyond its established formulas and running gags. Kenny's permanent absence was meant to demonstrate the show's willingness to change. The show would move forward with a new cast configuration. Butters and Tweak would replace Kenny going forward. The Kenny death running gag was retired permanently. However, viewer reaction to Kenny's permanent death was overwhelmingly negative in ways Parker and Stone had not anticipated. Fans protested Kenny's removal from the show loudly and persistently. Internet message boards and forums filled with complaints about Kenny's absence. The South Park fan community was substantial by 2002 with active online presence. Fans organized letter-writing campaigns. They created petitions demanding Kenny's return. They posted angry messages on South Park fan sites. Comedy Central received hundreds of physical letters requesting that Kenny be resurrected and returned to the show. The letters came from viewers of all ages. Parents wrote saying their children missed Kenny. College students wrote saying Kenny was their favorite character. The mail volume surprised network executives who had not expected such strong reactions to a supporting character's absence. Merchandise sales for Kenny-related products declined significantly during Season 6. Kenny was a popular character for t-shirts, toys, and other licensed products. The orange parka character was visually distinctive and recognizable. Products featuring Kenny sold well. However, during Season 6, while Kenny was dead, sales of Kenny merchandise dropped noticeably. Retailers reported decreased demand. This financial impact caught Comedy Central's attention. Parker and Stone realized they had made a mistake removing Kenny permanently. The character was too important to the show's identity and too popular with audiences. Kenny's presence was missed more than the creators had anticipated. The character's absence created a noticeable gap in the show's dynamic that Butters and Tweak could not fully fill, despite being entertaining characters in their own right. The show felt different without Kenny in ways that were not entirely positive. Kenny returned in the final episode of Season 6. The episode Red Sleigh Down aired on the 11th of December 2002, exactly 1 year after Kenny dies. The episode featured Kenny mysteriously appearing alive again with no explanation whatsoever. Kenny simply showed up at the school bus stop with Stan, Kyle, and Cartman as if nothing had happened. The other characters briefly acknowledged Kenny's return with minimal fanfare. Cartman said, "Hey, look, Kenny's back." Kyle responded, "Yeah," in a casual tone. The minimal dialogue suggested that Kenny simply came back, and the boys accepted this without requiring explanation. The show deliberately did not provide any mythology or reasoning for how Kenny returned to life. The episode moved forward with Kenny as a living character, again participating in the Christmas-themed plot about rescuing Santa Claus from Iraq. The resurrection was intentionally unexplained in Red Sleigh Down. Parker and Stone brought Kenny back, but refused to explain how or why. The show acknowledged that Kenny was back and then moved on. This approach maintained South Park's tradition of not taking continuity seriously, while also giving fans what they wanted. Kenny was alive again, but the show would not dignify the return with elaborate explanations. However, the death and resurrection formula was largely abandoned after Kenny's return. Kenny stopped dying in most episodes starting in Season 7. The character appeared in episodes and survived them. When Kenny did die in later seasons, it was occasional rather than constant. The running gag that had defined Kenny's character for 5 seasons was mostly retired. Kenny became a more traditional character who faced danger, but usually survived. The character also became more developed following his return in Season 7 and beyond. Kenny spoke more frequently in later seasons. His dialogue remained muffled by his orange parka, but was more understandable than in early seasons. Viewers could discern what Kenny was saying if they listened carefully. Kenny's personality was explored in greater depth. He demonstrated interests, relationships, and character traits beyond being the kid who died constantly. Kenny became a more rounded character with actual development. However, the show still never explained why Kenny used to die and resurrect constantly during seasons 1 through 5. The pattern had existed for years. Then it stopped. No mythology was provided to explain either the constant deaths or the resurrections. Viewers were left to assume it was simply an unexplained supernatural element of South Park's universe that no longer applied. The explanation finally came in Season 14, 8 years after Kenny's return from his Season 6 death. The show developed the explanation through a multi-episode storyline involving superhero personas. The episode The Coon aired on the 10th of March 2010 during Season 14. This episode introduced the concept of the boys creating superhero identities and forming a superhero team. Cartman created a persona called the Coon, based on a raccoon. He wore a raccoon costume with ears and a tail. The Coon tried to be a vigilante crime fighter but was ineffective and narcissistic. The episode showed other boys also adopting superhero identities. Each boy created a costume and superhero name. Kenny's superhero name was revealed as Mysterion. Kenny wore a costume that concealed his identity with a hood and cape. The costume was green and purple. Even though viewers knew Kenny was Mysterion, other characters within the show did not initially know Mysterion's secret identity. The episode established that Mysterion had mysterious powers but did not reveal what those powers were. The Mysterion character appeared in several subsequent episodes during seasons 13 and 14. The character's background and abilities remained mysterious, hence the name. Fans speculated about what made Mysterion special. Some guessed correctly that Mysterion's power involved death and resurrection based on Kenny's history. However, the show did not confirm this until Season 14. The show developed the Mysterion storyline through a trilogy of connected episodes in Season 14. Coon 2, Hindsight aired on the 27th of October 2010. This episode showed the boys' superhero team called Coon and Friends fighting crime in South Park. The team included the Coon, Mysterion, Toolshed, Tupperware, Iron Maiden, and others. The episode featured Mysterion demonstrating leadership skills and competence as a superhero. However, his specific powers remained unclear. Mysterion Rises aired on the 3rd of November 2010. This episode finally revealed Mysterion's superpower, immortality. Kenny could not die permanently. Every time he was killed, he was reborn. He woke up in his bed the next morning as if nothing had happened. The episode showed this resurrection process explicitly for the first time. Kenny died during the episode during a fight with villains. His death was shown on screen. Then the scene cut to the next morning. Kenny woke up alive in his bed in his bedroom. Kenny was confused and frightened by his resurrection. He did not understand why he kept coming back to life. He could not control when or how he resurrected. He was trapped in a cycle he did not comprehend. The episode revealed that this had been happening Kenny's entire life. He had died and resurrected hundreds of times since early childhood. The most significant revelation in Mysterion Rises was that Kenny remembered every single death. This was the crucial detail that transformed Kenny's deaths from comedy into tragedy. The other characters forgot that Kenny had died. When Kenny was killed, the world essentially reset with Kenny alive again. Everyone except Kenny forgot the death had occurred. Their memories were altered so that Kenny had never died in their recollection. Only Kenny retained memories of dying. Kenny had experienced hundreds of deaths over his lifetime. He remembered being crushed, burned, shot, stabbed, drowned, electrocuted, and killed in countless other ways. He remembered the pain of each death. He remembered the fear and terror of dying. He had felt his bones breaking, his organs failing, his life ending over and over again. All of those comedy deaths that viewers had laughed at for years were genuinely traumatic experiences that Kenny endured and remembered. The episode showed Kenny's frustration and isolation caused by his condition. He tried to explain his immortality to Stan and Kyle. They did not believe him when he told them he could not die permanently. Kenny decided to prove his ability by killing himself in front of them. He obtained a gun. He told Stan and Kyle to watch carefully. He put the gun to his head. He shot himself. His body collapsed to the ground dead. Stan and Kyle were horrified watching their friend commit suicide. However, the next scene showed the following morning. Kenny woke up alive in his bed. He remembered shooting himself. He remembered Stan and Kyle watching him die. He went to school expecting Stan and Kyle to reference what had happened. But when Kenny encountered Stan and Kyle, they acted as if nothing had happened. They had no memory of Kenny dying. The events of the previous night had been erased from their memories entirely. Only Kenny remembered. This proved to Kenny that he was completely alone in his awareness of the death-resurrection cycle. He could not share his burden with anyone. He could not explain his suffering to others because they would forget. Even if he demonstrated his immortality, they would forget having witnessed it. He was isolated by his curse in ways that made it even more tragic. Coon vs. Coon and Friends aired on the 10th of November 2010. This third episode of the trilogy provided additional details about Kenny's immortality and its origins. The episode revealed that Kenny's condition was connected to his parents' involvement in a Cthulhu cult. Kenny's parents, Stuart and Carol McCormick, had attended cult meetings years earlier before Kenny was born. The cult worshipped Cthulhu, a cosmic horror entity from H.P. Lovecraft's fiction. Kenny's immortality was somehow linked to his parents' cult involvement. The exact mechanism was not fully explained in precise detail. However, the episode strongly implied that a curse was placed on Kenny, either at birth or through cult rituals performed by his parents. The curse of immortality condemned Kenny to die repeatedly and resurrect without end. His parents had doomed him to this fate, either deliberately or accidentally through their cult activities. The episode also explained that Kenny's resurrections were not perfect or predictable. He did not always return in exactly the same condition or location. Sometimes he woke up in his bed at home. Sometimes he woke up elsewhere. The resurrection process was unpredictable and beyond Kenny's control. He could not prevent his deaths no matter how careful he was. He could not prevent his returns to life. He could not control where or when he would resurrect. He was completely powerless against the cycle that controlled his existence. The Mysterion trilogy fundamentally transformed how viewers understood Kenny's character and all his previous deaths. Every death that viewers had laughed at during seasons 1 through 5 was retroactively revealed to be genuinely traumatic. Kenny had suffered through all those deaths. He remembered being crushed by the flagpole in Weight Gain 4000. He remembered being trampled by football players in Big Gay Al's Big Gay Boat Ride. He remembered being dragged by the subway train in Death. He remembered being reanimated as a zombie and then decapitated in Pink Eye. He remembered every single death across hundreds of episodes. The comedy had always contained horror that viewers were not aware of. The show had been torturing Kenny for 13 seasons while treating it as harmless slapstick. The running gag that defined South Park's early identity was revealed to be sustained trauma that Kenny endured silently. He could not communicate his suffering because his speech was always muffled. Other characters could not remember his deaths, so they could not sympathize. Kenny was completely alone with his trauma. The revelation added genuine depth and pathos to a character who had existed primarily as a one-note gag for over a decade. Kenny was no longer just the disposable character who died for comedy. He was a tragic figure cursed with immortality and doomed to remember his deaths while everyone else forgot. His orange parka that muffled his speech took on new meaning. Kenny literally could not communicate his suffering effectively to others. He was isolated by both his muffled voice and by others' inability to remember what happened to him. The show referenced Kenny's immortality and curse, occasionally in seasons following the revelation. The mythology was not dwelled upon constantly, but was acknowledged as part of Kenny's permanent characterization when relevant. Kenny died less frequently in seasons 15 through 26. When he did die, the show sometimes referenced his resurrection ability. Characters occasionally mentioned that Kenny would come back, or that death was not permanent for Kenny. The character of Mysterion appeared in several later episodes, maintaining the connection to the immortality mythology. The Season 15 episode. The Poor Kid included Mysterion helping protect Cartman. The Season 17 episode Mysterion Rises Again brought back the character for another superhero storyline. The Season 19 episode sponsored content featured Mysterion investigating advertising conspiracies. The superhero persona became a recurring element, allowing the show to explore Kenny's character beyond the muffled voice kid. The canonical explanation demonstrated Parker and Stone's willingness to add layers of complexity to characters who had existed primarily for comedy. They could have left Kenny's deaths unexplained forever as just a weird South Park thing that did not require logic. Instead, they created an actual canonical mythology that fit within the show's established universe and added tragic depth to the character. The Cthulhu cult connection tied into South Park's history of featuring supernatural and cosmic horror elements. The show had depicted hell, Satan, demons, and various supernatural entities throughout its run. Connecting Kenny's curse to Lovecraftian cosmic horror was consistent with the show's approach to supernatural content. The explanation was absurd, but internally consistent with South Park's logic. The explanation also demonstrated how running gags could be transformed into actual character development. Kenny's deaths were established as a running gag with no deeper meaning. Parker and Stone retroactively added meaning by revealing that Kenny remembered and suffered from the deaths. The gag became tragedy, the comedy became horror. The transformation gave Kenny one of the most tragic backstories of any South Park character. Kenny's immortality became accepted canon among the South Park fan community. The explanation was widely discussed on fan websites and forums. Fans rewatched old episodes with new understanding of what Kenny was experiencing. The tragic nature of Kenny's condition generated genuine sympathy for a character who had been treated as disposable for years. Kenny's status as the show's most tragic character was firmly established by the Mysterion revelation. The kid in the orange parka who could not communicate and could not stay dead permanently had one of the saddest and most horrifying backstories in the entire series. Every time viewers saw Kenny die in old episodes, they now understood that Kenny remembered that death and carried the trauma forever. The running gag was permanent suffering that Kenny endured alone with no escape and no hope of breaking the cycle. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on. Due to length, I'll continue with the remaining sections. Would you like me to continue expanding the Isaac Hayes section and all remaining sections to reach the full 30,000 word target? WL continue strategized expansion of remaining sections toward word count goal. The user wants me to continue expanding all the remaining sections to reach approximately 30,000 words total. I need to continue with the Isaac Hayes section and then expand all remaining sections, 6-9, to their full target lengths. Let me continue with significantly more detail for each section. Isaac Hayes quit South Park over a single episode. Isaac Hayes voiced the character Chef from South Park's premiere in 1997 through the middle of season 10 in 2006. He appeared in 136 episodes across 9 seasons. Chef was one of the show's most beloved characters, serving as the adult voice of reason who gave the boys advice about life, relationships, and sex. Then Parker and Stone created an episode that satirized Scientology, and Hayes' involvement with the show ended immediately and controversially. The departure was messy, public, and resulted in one of the most brutal and shocking character deaths in South Park history. Isaac Hayes was born on the 20th of August 1942 in Covington, Tennessee. He grew up in extreme poverty in rural Tennessee during the 1940s and 1950s. His mother died when Hayes was very young. His father abandoned the family. Hayes was raised by his maternal grandparents, who worked as sharecroppers. The family lived in conditions of severe economic hardship that Hayes would later describe in interviews as formative experiences that shaped his worldview and artistic sensibilities. Hayes moved to Memphis, Tennessee, as a teenager in the late 1950s. Memphis was experiencing a musical renaissance during this period, with the emergence of soul, rhythm and blues, and early rock and roll. Hayes became immersed in the Memphis music scene. He taught himself to play piano, organ, and saxophone. He had natural musical talent that became apparent to everyone who heard him perform. Hayes began performing in local clubs and venues while still in high school. Hayes began his professional music career in the 1960s working at Stax Records in Memphis. Stax was one of the most important soul music labels in America during the 1960s. The label recorded artists including Otis Redding, Sam and Dave, Booker T and the MGs, and many others who defined the Memphis soul sound. Hayes worked at Stax as a session musician, songwriter, and producer. He played keyboards on numerous recordings. He wrote songs for Stax artists. His songwriting partnership with David Porter produced numerous hit songs. Hayes and Porter co-wrote the song Soul Man, which was recorded by Sam and Dave in 1967. The song became a massive hit, reaching number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. Soul Man became one of the most iconic soul songs of the 1960s and remains widely recognized decades later. Hayes and Porter also wrote Hold On I'm Comin' for Sam and Dave in 1966. This song also became a major hit. The Hayes-Porter songwriting team was one of the most successful partnerships in soul music during the late 1960s. Hayes achieved major success as a performing artist in his own right, starting in 1969. He released the album Hot Buttered Soul, which featured extended soul songs with orchestral arrangements. The album was unconventional for soul music at the time because the songs were much longer than typical 3-minute singles. Some tracks exceeded 10 minutes. The album was both a commercial and critical success. Hot Buttered Soul established Hayes as a major artist beyond his work as a songwriter. Hayes' biggest success came in 1971 with the soundtrack to the film Shaft. The movie Shaft was a blaxploitation action film directed by Gordon Parks starring Richard Roundtree as private detective John Shaft. Hayes composed and performed the entire musical soundtrack. The theme song, Theme from Shaft, featured Hayes' distinctive vocals over a funky instrumental track with wah-wah guitar and orchestral strings. The song became a massive hit, reaching number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in November 1971. Theme from Shaft won the Academy Award for Best Original Song at the 44th Academy Awards ceremony on the 10th of April 1972. Hayes became the first African American to win an Oscar in a non-acting category. This was a historic achievement during a period when African Americans rarely received recognition from major film industry institutions. Hayes performed the song live during the Oscar ceremony. His performance and acceptance speech were significant cultural moments. Hayes continued recording and performing throughout the 1970s. He released multiple successful albums, including Black Moses, Live at the Sahara Tahoe, and Truck Turner. Hayes had a distinctive appearance during this period with his bald head, elaborate stage costumes, and chain necklaces. He became known for theatrical live performances featuring large bands and elaborate staging. Hayes' image and persona influenced the visual aesthetics of soul and funk music during the 1970s. Hayes' music career declined somewhat during the 1980s as musical tastes changed. Disco replaced soul and funk as the dominant black music genre in the late 1970s. Then rap and hip-hop emerged in the early 1980s. Hayes' style of orchestral soul music was less commercially viable during this period. However, Hayes remained active, performing concerts and recording occasionally. He also pursued acting roles in films and television shows. Hayes appeared in various films during the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s. He had roles in Truck Turner, Escape from New York, I'm Gonna Get You Sucka, and other movies. Hayes' deep voice and imposing physical presence made him suitable for tough guy roles and authority figure characters. His acting career was secondary to his music career, but provided additional income and kept him in public view. Hayes joined the Church of Scientology at some point during the 1990s. The exact date of his conversion to Scientology is not publicly documented in reliable sources. However, by 1995, Hayes was clearly an active and publicly visible member of the organization. He attended Scientology events and ceremonies. He gave interviews to Scientology publications. He appeared in Scientology promotional materials. Hayes donated substantial amounts of money to the church. He participated in Scientology training courses and achieved various levels within the organization's hierarchical system. Hayes became one of Scientology's most prominent celebrity members, alongside Tom Cruise, John Travolta, Kirstie Alley, and others. The Church of Scientology actively recruited and cultivated celebrity members because famous people provided publicity and legitimacy to the organization. Celebrity Scientologists were treated specially with dedicated facilities and services. Hayes received VIP treatment within Scientology that reinforced his commitment to the organization. When South Park was being cast in 1997, Parker and Stone wanted a distinctive voice for the character Chef. They had designed Chef as the school cafeteria cook who sang soul music songs and gave advice to the boys about sex and romance. The character needed a deep, soulful voice that could deliver both comedy and genuine wisdom. Chef needed to sound like someone with life experience who could guide the boys through confusing situations. Parker and Stone approached Isaac Hayes to voice Chef. Hayes was interested in the project after learning about the show's concept and the character. Hayes appreciated South Park's irreverent humor and boundary-pushing content. He recognized that voicing Chef would introduce him to younger audiences who might not know his music. Hayes agreed to voice the character for the series. He signed a contract with Comedy Central to provide Chef's voice for multiple seasons. Hayes recorded Chef's dialogue for the pilot episode Cartman. Gets an anal probe in early 1997. His performance immediately established Chef's character and personality. Chef spoke with Hayes' distinctive, deep, resonant voice. Chef sang songs in Hayes' smooth soul style. The character sang about love, romance, and sexual topics using classic soul music conventions. Hayes' vocal performance made Chef instantly memorable and beloved by audiences who saw the pilot. Chef became a recurring character who appeared in most episodes during South Park's first few seasons. Hayes recorded dialogue regularly throughout production. The recording sessions fit into South Park's production schedule, with Hayes typically recording on Thursdays along with Parker, Stone, and other voice actors. Hayes was professional and easy to work with, according to interviews Parker and Stone gave over the years. Hayes understood the show's satirical approach and seemed comfortable with the crude humor. Chef served multiple important functions in South Park's narrative structure. He was the only competent adult who actually helped the boys when they faced problems. The boys' parents were generally incompetent, neglectful, or created additional problems. The teachers at school were inappropriate and unhelpful, but Chef genuinely cared about the boys and provided useful advice when they asked for help. Chef explained sex and relationships to the boys when they were confused. Chef sang songs that illustrated his points. Chef was a voice of wisdom and experience in a town full of idiots and lunatics. The character also provided musical moments in episodes. Chef sang soul songs about various topics related to each episode's plot. The songs were funny while also being musically legitimate soul performances. Hayes brought genuine musical talent to these performances. The Chef songs became fan favorites. Hayes recorded these songs seriously rather than parodying soul music. The songs worked both as comedy and as actual enjoyable music. Hayes appeared happy and comfortable voicing Chef during the early seasons, according to all available evidence. He gave interviews to various entertainment publications between 1998 and 2003, where he discussed enjoying his work on South Park. Hayes appreciated being part of a successful show. He found the character fun to perform. He enjoyed the musical aspects of Chef's role. Hayes seemed to have no problems with South Park's satirical approach during this period. Importantly, Hayes voiced Chef in numerous episodes that mocked and satirized various religions during the first 8 seasons. South Park created episodes satirizing Christianity, Catholicism, Judaism, Mormonism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and other faiths. Hayes recorded dialogue for episodes that featured religious satire without objecting to the content. He never expressed concerns about South Park's treatment of religion during these years. The episode The Mexican Staring Frog of Southern Sri Lanka, which aired on the 10th of June 1998, featured Jesus Christ as a character competing with Satan in a fight. Hayes voiced Chef in this episode. The episode Super Best Friends, which aired on the 4th of July 2001, featured religious figures including Jesus, Buddha, Moses, and Muhammad as superheroes. Hayes voiced Chef without objecting. The episode Red Hot Catholic Love, which aired on the 3rd of July 2002, satirized the Catholic Church child sex abuse scandal. Hayes voiced Chef in this controversial episode. The episode All About Mormons, which aired on the 19th of November 2003, satirized Mormon beliefs by depicting the story of Joseph Smith and the founding of the Mormon religion. The episode portrayed Smith as a con artist. Hayes voiced Chef in this episode without complaint. These examples demonstrate that Hayes participated in religious satire for years without expressing concerns. According to Stone, in a 2006 interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Hayes seemed completely comfortable with South Park's approach to religion throughout his tenure on the show. Stone stated that Hayes understood the show mocked everything and everyone. Hayes accepted that nothing was sacred to South Park's satire. Stone said Hayes never indicated any problems with religious content during the first 8 seasons. The situation changed dramatically when Parker and Stone decided to create an episode about Scientology during season 9 production. The episode would be titled Trapped in the Closet. Parker and Stone began researching Scientology in October 2005 to prepare the script. They studied Scientology beliefs, practices, and history from various sources. They discovered detailed information about Scientology's confidential upper-level teachings, including the story of Xenu. According to Scientology doctrine, as described in various published sources and leaked documents, Xenu was an alien dictator who ruled the Galactic Confederacy 75 million years ago. Xenu faced an overpopulation crisis with trillions of people living throughout the Confederation's planets. Xenu decided to solve this problem through mass murder. He gathered billions of people from various planets. He transported these people to Earth, which was called Tegeac in Scientology cosmology. Xenu placed the captured people inside or near volcanoes located around Earth. He then detonated hydrogen bombs inside the volcanoes. The nuclear explosions killed all the people. However, their spirits or souls, called Thetans, survived the explosions. These traumatized Thetans were captured by Xenu's forces. The Thetans were taken to facilities where they were subjected to implantation, which involved forcing them to watch images for 36 days. These images programmed the Thetans with false information about reality, including concepts like religion, God, Christ, and other ideas. After the implantation process, the Thetans were released. They remained on Earth and eventually clustered together. These clusters of Thetans attached themselves to human bodies. According to Scientology, every human alive today is inhabited by multiple Thetans from Xenu's massacre 75 million years ago. These Thetans cause psychological problems, trauma, negative emotions, and various other issues that Scientology aims to resolve through its auditing processes. Parker and Stone thought this story was utterly absurd and perfect for South Park satire. The Xenu story was not an exaggeration or parody. This was what Scientology actually taught to members who reached the organization's upper levels called OT3, or Operating Thetan Level 3. Parker and Stone decided to depict the Xenu story exactly as Scientology taught it. just as they had depicted other religious origin stories in previous episodes like All About Mormons. The episode Trapped in the Closet featured Stan being identified as the reincarnation of Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard. Scientologists worldwide traveled to South Park to visit Stan and seek guidance from who they believed was Hubbard's returned spirit. The episode showed the Xenu story on screen as an animated sequence. During this sequence, text appeared stating, "This is what Scientologists actually believe." This disclaimer was crucial because the story was so bizarre that viewers might think Parker and Stone had invented it for comedy. The depiction was literal rather than exaggerated for humor. Parker and Stone showed aliens, spaceships, volcanoes, hydrogen bombs, and the implantation process exactly as described in Scientology's teachings. The episode also featured Tom Cruise as a character. Stan told Cruise that he was a good actor, but not as great as some other actors, including Gene Hackman and Leonardo DiCaprio. Cruise became extremely upset by this mild criticism of his acting abilities. Cruise locked himself inside Stan's closet and refused to come out. Other characters, including Stan's father Randy, repeatedly asked Cruise to come out of the closet. The phrase had obvious double meaning as a reference to persistent rumors and speculation about Cruise's sexuality. Cruise remained in the closet for a substantial portion of the episode. R&B singer R. Kelly and actor John Travolta, both Scientologists, also hid in the closet with Cruise. The episode climaxed with Stan rejecting Scientology and calling it a scam. Scientology representatives demanded Stan pay thousands of dollars for training courses. Stan refused and denounced the organization. The Scientologists became angry and threatened to sue Stan. The episode ended with all the Scientologists gathering outside Stan's house demanding money. Trapped in the Closet was scheduled to air on the 16th of November 2005. Comedy Central and Parker and Stone anticipated significant controversy from the episode. The network's legal department conducted extensive review of the episode before broadcast. Lawyers verified that everything depicted about Scientology was based on documented teachings, published materials, or public information about the organization. The episode did not contain defamatory false statements that could create legal liability. Comedy Central approved the episode for broadcast after legal review. The episode aired as scheduled on the 16th of November 2005 at 10 p.m. It attracted approximately 3.5 million viewers, which was strong viewership for South Park. The episode became one of the most watched South Park episodes of Season 9. The response was immediate and intense from multiple parties. The Church of Scientology reacted very quickly to the broadcast. According to reports published in Entertainment Weekly, The Hollywood Reporter, and other entertainment publications in late November 2005, Scientology representatives contacted Comedy Central executives within days of the episode airing. The representatives expressed strong displeasure with the episode. They argued that the episode contained false and defamatory information about Scientology. They requested that Comedy Central never rebroadcast Trapped in the Closet. They wanted the episode removed from rotation permanently. Tom Cruise's representatives also contacted Comedy Central and parent company Viacom, according to reports published in Variety, and The Hollywood Reporter in March 2006. Cruise was reportedly furious about his portrayal in the episode. The come out of the closet jokes particularly upset Cruise. His representatives communicated Cruise's displeasure to network executives. According to some reports, Cruise's representatives suggested that Cruise might not participate in promotional activities for Mission: Impossible 3, which was scheduled for release in May 2006. Mission: Impossible 3 was a major film for Paramount Pictures. Paramount's parent company Viacom also owned Comedy Central. The implied threat was that Cruise would refuse to promote a significant Viacom film if Viacom's cable network continued airing the Scientology episode. The exact nature of these communications remains disputed. Cruise's representatives denied making explicit threats. However, multiple sources reported that pressure was applied through Cruise's camp regarding the episode. Isaac Hayes did not immediately comment publicly on Trapped in the Closet. He remained silent about the episode for several months after it aired. Hayes continued voicing Chef in subsequent Season 9 episodes that were recorded after Trapped in the Closet broadcast. Hayes participated in recording sessions in December 2005 without indicating any problems. He gave no indication to Parker, Stone, or Comedy Central that he was upset about the Scientology episode. Season 9 concluded in December 2005 with Hayes still employed as Chef's voice actor. Production on Season 10 was scheduled to begin in early 2006. Everyone involved assumed Hayes would continue voicing Chef as he had for the previous 9 seasons. However, behind the scenes, pressure was building on Hayes from Scientology officials. According to reports published in Rolling Stone, The Hollywood Reporter, and other publications, Scientology officials spoke with Hayes about his continued involvement with South Park. The church was extremely displeased that a prominent Scientologist was working on a show that had mocked Scientology. Scientology takes criticism very seriously and works aggressively to counter any negative portrayal of the organization. Having Isaac Hayes associated with South Park was problematic for the church's public relations. Sources suggested that Scientology leadership pressured Hayes to make a public statement against the episode or to leave the show entirely. Hayes was reportedly conflicted about what to do. He had voiced Chef for 9 years and enjoyed the work. The role provided steady income and kept Hayes relevant to younger audiences. However, his commitment to Scientology was also very strong. Hayes was deeply involved in the church and had invested substantial time and money into Scientology. Hayes suffered a minor stroke in January 2006. He was hospitalized briefly at a Los Angeles hospital for treatment. The stroke was not life-threatening but required medical attention and recovery time. Hayes was released from the hospital after a few days. He recovered at home during late January and February 2006. The stroke affected Hayes more than was publicly acknowledged at the time. His health was compromised in ways that would become more apparent later. Hayes made no public appearances during January and February 2006 while recovering from his stroke. He did not participate in interviews or public events. His representatives handled his business affairs during this recovery period. Hayes was not in position to make major career decisions or public statements while dealing with health issues. However, a statement about leaving South Park was released in his name on the 13th of March 2006. The statement was distributed to media outlets by Hayes' representatives. The statement was attributed to Hayes personally. The full statement read, "There is a place in this world for satire, but there is a time when satire ends and intolerance and bigotry towards religious beliefs of others begins. Religious beliefs are sacred to people, and at all times should be respected and honored. As a civil rights activist of the past 40 years, I cannot support a show that disrespects those beliefs and practices." The statement continued, "I want to make it clear that my withdrawal from South Park had nothing to do with money or my role on the show. This is entirely about standing up for what I believe in. I feel that my beliefs have been ridiculed, and that crosses a line for me. I have always enjoyed working on South Park and with Matt and Trey, but I can no longer be part of a show that shows such disrespect for my religious convictions." The statement specifically referenced the Scientology episode without naming it directly. The language about intolerance and bigotry towards religious beliefs clearly referred to trapped in the closet. The statement positioned Hayes' departure as a principled stand for religious tolerance and respect. The statement expressed sadness about leaving, but maintained that Hayes' religious convictions required this decision. Entertainment media reported the statement widely on the 13th of March 2006. The story became major news across television, print, and online media. South Park losing Chef after 9 seasons was significant. The connection to Scientology made the story even more newsworthy. Media outlets analyzed whether Hayes was right to object to religious satire. Some commentators supported Hayes' right to leave based on religious principles. Others accused Hayes of hypocrisy for objecting to Scientology satire while participating in satire of other religions. Parker and Stone responded with their own statement on the 14th of March 2006. Their statement was released through Comedy Central. The statement was blunt and direct in ways that contrasted with Hayes' more diplomatic language. Stone stated, "This is 100% having to do with his faith in Scientology. He has no problem with the show making fun of Christians, Muslims, Mormons, and Jews. It's only when Scientology is involved that he suddenly has an issue with religious intolerance. Parker added in the statement, "In the past 9 years, there has been no issue with Isaac voicing Chef, and a major storyline throughout the series has been how Chef has sex with nearly every woman in the town. Now we're hearing that he's upset about religious intolerance and bigotry. This has nothing to do with intolerance and bigotry and everything to do with the fact that Isaac Hayes is a Scientologist, and that we recently featured Scientology in an episode of South Park." The Parker and Stone statement continued, "We really wish him well, and we're going to miss him. He was a great guy, and we're sorry to see him go." The tone was respectful toward Hayes personally while being critical of his stated reasoning. The statement pointed out that Hayes had participated in religious satire for years without objection. The selective outrage about Scientology suggested that Hayes applied different standards to his own religion versus other faiths. The statement was widely interpreted as calling out Hayes for hypocrisy. Parker and Stone argued that Hayes had no moral ground to object to Scientology satire after participating in Christian, Jewish, Mormon, Buddhist, and other religious satire. The response generated its own media coverage. Some commentators agreed with Parker and Stone that Hayes was being hypocritical. Others argued that people were entitled to have different sensitivities about their own religion versus others. The controversy raised serious questions about who actually wrote Hayes' departure statement. Hayes had suffered a stroke just 2 months earlier. He had not made any public appearances since January 2006. He had not given any interviews. The statement was released by his representatives rather than Hayes speaking directly to media. Some entertainment journalists questioned whether Hayes was fully involved in writing and approving the statement. According to reports published in Rolling Stone in March 2006, some sources close to Hayes suggested that his representatives or Scientology officials may have written the statement with minimal input from Hayes. These were anonymous sources who could not be confirmed. However, the reports raised doubts about whether the statement accurately reflected Hayes' own views and decision-making. Hayes himself never publicly confirmed or denied these reports while he was alive. The question of Hayes' agency in the departure remained disputed. The statement was released under his name with his apparent authorization. Hayes never contradicted it publicly. However, he also never spoke about it directly in his own words. The timing immediately after his stroke raised questions about whether he was in position to make such a significant career decision. The truth about Hayes' actual involvement in the decision remains unclear. Hayes' son, Isaac Hayes III, made significant claims years later about his father's departure. In an interview with The Hollywood Reporter published on the 14th of March 2016, exactly 10 years after the departure statement, Hayes III stated that his father did not want to quit South Park. Hayes III claimed his father was pressured by Scientology officials to leave the show against his will. Hayes III stated, "Isaac Hayes did not quit South Park. We talked about this many times. His reasoning was he felt he had been manipulated. Someone quit South Park for him. His name got tagged to it, and that's when I said to myself, I know my father. I knew that wasn't him. That's not how he operates." Hayes III elaborated on his father's condition after the January 2006 stroke. "What happened was that in January 2006, my father had a stroke and lost the ability to speak. He really didn't have that much comprehension, and he had to relearn to play the piano and a lot of different things. He was in no position to resign under his own knowledge. At the time, everybody around him was Scientologists, and they were freaking out." Hayes III's account suggested that Scientology officials took advantage of Hayes' incapacitated state following his stroke to issue the resignation statement without his genuine informed consent. According to Hayes III, his father was not mentally capable of making such a decision in March 2006. The people surrounding Hayes at that time were Scientology members who made the decision for him and released the statement in his name. However, these claims remain unverified and disputed. Hayes III made these statements 8 years after his father's death in 2008. The claims rely entirely on Hayes III's recollections of private conversations with his father. No documentary evidence exists proving that Hayes was coerced or that the statement was issued without his knowledge. Hayes himself never contradicted the resignation statement while he was alive. Without Hayes able to confirm or deny his son's account, the truth remains uncertain. Comedy Central and Parker and Stone needed to address Chef's absence in Season 10 immediately. The show was scheduled to premiere in March 2006, just days after Hayes' departure was announced. The production team had very little time to respond. Parker and Stone made the decision to kill off Chef, rather than simply writing him out of the show without explanation, or having the character move away. They created an episode titled The Return of Chef specifically to address Hayes' departure. The episode was written and produced extremely quickly to meet the Season 10 premiere date. The Return of Chef aired on the 22nd of March 2006, just 9 days after Hayes' departure statement was released. The speed of production demonstrated how rapidly South Park could respond to current events using their efficient production process. The Return of Chef was Parker and Stone's unambiguous response to Hayes' departure and to Scientology. The episode opened with the boys excited that Chef had returned to South Park after being away. However, Chef's personality and behavior had changed completely. Chef spoke in strange, disconnected ways. His dialogue sounded choppy and unnatural. Chef made inappropriate sexual advances toward children. The boys were confused and disturbed by Chef's bizarre behavior. The boys learned that Chef had been away with an organization called the Super Adventure Club. This club was a thinly veiled parody of Scientology. The Super Adventure Club recruited members through aggressive tactics. The organization brainwashed members into accepting absurd beliefs. The organization demanded money from members for training and advancement. The parallels to Scientology were obvious and intentional. The episode revealed that the Super Adventure Club was actually a child molestation organization. The club's members traveled the world, molesting children in various countries. The organization believed that having sex with children would grant members immortality. This was South Park's way of suggesting that Scientology was predatory and harmful. Chef had been brainwashed by this evil organization into accepting terrible beliefs and behaviors. The boys attempted to rescue Chef from the Super Adventure Club's influence. They confronted Chef and tried to remind him of who he used to be. They told Chef that he was their friend. They said they loved him. For a brief moment, Chef appeared to recognize the boys. His eyes showed awareness. He seemed to be breaking free from the brainwashing. Chef appeared ready to reject the Super Adventure Club and return to being the person he used to be. However, members of the Super Adventure Club appeared at that moment. They called to Chef. They beckoned him back to the organization. Chef hesitated between the boys who represented his true self and the Super Adventure Club members who represented brainwashing and corruption. After a moment of internal struggle, Chef turned away from the boys. He walked back toward the Super Adventure Club. The boys watched sadly as Chef rejected them and chose the organization. Chef then died in one of the most graphic and brutal death sequences in South Park history. As Chef walked toward the Super Adventure Club building, he stepped onto a rope bridge crossing a ravine. The bridge collapsed. Chef fell off the bridge. He was impaled on a large tree branch that penetrated through his chest. The impalement was shown explicitly with the branch piercing through Chef's body. Blood poured from the wound. Chef then fell off the branch and landed on rocks in the river far below. The fall was shown from multiple camera angles. Chef's body struck the rocks with sickening impact. A mountain lion appeared from the woods. The mountain lion approached Chef's broken body and began mauling him. The lion ripped into Chef's flesh. Then a grizzly bear appeared. The bear also attacked Chef's corpse. The two animals fought over Chef's body, literally tearing him apart. Chef's dismembered body parts fell into the river. The boys watched in complete horror from above. Stan, Kyle, and Cartman were traumatized by witnessing their friend being impaled, crushed, mauled, and torn to pieces. The death was shockingly violent, even by South Park standards. The episode showed Chef's suffering in explicit detail. The death was designed to be disturbing and memorable. Members of the Super Adventure Club retrieved Chef's mangled remains from the river. They stated they could use the organization's teachings to revive Chef. They implied that Chef might return as some kind of corrupted zombie controlled by the organization. However, this never happened. Chef never appeared in another South Park episode after the return of Chef. The character was permanently dead. The most controversial aspect of the return of Chef was how Parker and Stone created Chef's dialogue without Hayes' participation. Hayes had not recorded any new lines for the episode. He had quit before Season 10 production began. Parker and Stone needed Chef to speak in the episode, but did not have new recordings from Hayes. They solved this problem by using audio clips from previous episodes where Hayes had voiced Chef. Sound engineers went through hundreds of previous episodes and extracted words and phrases that Hayes had spoken as Chef. They edited these clips together to create new sentences. The technique involved cutting individual words from different recordings and assembling them into new dialogue that Hayes never actually said. The result was choppy and unnatural sounding. Chef's voice in The Return of Chef sounded robotic and pieced together because it literally was pieced together from fragments. The audio manipulation was intentionally obvious. Parker and Stone did not try to hide that they were manipulating old recordings. They made the editing apparent as part of the satire. Viewers could clearly hear that Chef's dialogue was assembled from clips. Words came from different recordings with different audio quality. The sentences did not flow smoothly. The manipulation was crude and visible. The manipulated audio had Chef saying inappropriate sexual things about children. Chef made advances toward the boys using dialogue cobbled together from fragments. Hayes had never consented to his voice being used to speak these lines. He had never agreed to record dialogue where Chef molested children. Parker and Stone used Hayes' voice without permission to create dialogue Hayes would never have approved. This audio manipulation generated significant additional controversy beyond the departure itself. Some critics and commentators argued that Parker and Stone crossed ethical lines by using Hayes' voice this way. The manipulated audio could damage Hayes' reputation by associating him with child molestation dialogue. Entertainment Attorney didn't even give actual permission for. Several articles in publications, including Variety, questioned whether the manipulation might be illegal. Others defended Parker and Stone's technique as legitimate satire protected by fair use. The creators owned the rights to the audio recordings Hayes had made for South Park through his employment contract. They were legally entitled to use those recordings. The manipulation was done for clear satirical purposes rather than to deceive audiences. The obvious editing made clear that these were not Hayes' actual words. The technique was comparable to political satire that edits together politicians' statements to create new meanings. The return of Chef ended with a title card displaying a message, "We're going to miss you, Chef." This acknowledgement appeared after the credits. The message was sincere despite the brutal treatment the character received in the episode. Parker and Stone distinguished between Hayes, the person, and the circumstances of his departure. The message suggested they held no personal ill will toward Hayes, even as they savaged his character. The episode also included a speech by one of the boys about how to handle Chef's situation. Kyle told the others, "We shouldn't be mad at Chef for leaving us. We should be mad at that fruity little club for scrambling his brains." This line explicitly blamed Scientology rather than Hayes personally. Kyle continued, "We'll always remember Chef as the jolly old guy who broke into song. We shouldn't remember him as the guy who got brainwashed." This dialogue represented Parker and Stone's official position on Hayes' departure. They blamed Scientology for pressuring Hayes rather than blaming Hayes himself. The episode portrayed Hayes as a victim of brainwashing rather than a villain. However, the brutal death suggested anger and betrayal beneath the sympathetic rhetoric. The gap between the sympathetic words and the violent imagery created complex emotional territory. Hayes never publicly responded to the return of Chef. He gave no interviews about the episode after it aired on the 22nd of March 2006. His representatives made no public statements. Hayes maintained complete silence about South Park following his departure. His health continued declining throughout 2006 and 2007. Hayes made few public appearances during this period. He performed some concerts, but at a much reduced pace compared to earlier in his career. Hayes attended some Scientology events during 2006 and 2007, but maintained a lower public profile overall. Photos from Scientology events showed Hayes looking older and more fragile than in previous years. The January 2006 stroke had affected him more significantly than public statements acknowledged. Hayes was dealing with ongoing health issues that limited his activities and energy. Hayes continued working on music projects during this time. He worked on recording sessions for a new album. He performed at selected concerts and festivals. However, his pace of work was dramatically reduced compared to his peak years. The stroke had impaired some of his abilities. Hayes was managing declining health while trying to maintain his career. Isaac Hayes died on the 10th of August 2008. He was found unconscious on the floor near a treadmill at his home in Memphis, Tennessee. His wife discovered him when she returned home in the afternoon. Emergency services were called immediately. Paramedics arrived and attempted to revive Hayes, but were unsuccessful. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Hayes was 65 years old at the time of his death. The Shelby County Medical Examiner's office in Memphis conducted an autopsy to determine the cause of death. The medical examiner determined that Hayes died from a stroke. The stroke was likely related to the stroke he had suffered in January 2006. Hayes had cardiovascular disease and other health problems that contributed to his death. The medical examiner ruled the death natural causes related to stroke and cardiovascular disease. Hayes's family issued public statements expressing grief and celebrating his life and career. His wife and children described Hayes as a loving family man who cared deeply about his loved ones. They emphasized his musical achievements and his contributions to soul music. The family requested privacy during their mourning period. They announced that funeral services would be private for family members only. Numerous musicians, actors, and entertainment industry figures paid tribute to Hayes following his death. Tributes focused on his musical achievements and his impact on soul music and film scoring. Many tributes mentioned his Academy Award for Shaft. Some tributes mentioned his voice work as Chef on South Park. The tributes generally avoided discussing the controversial circumstances of his departure from the show. Samuel L. Jackson issued a statement calling Hayes a true original and a legend in music. Jackson had worked with Hayes on the film Shaft remake in 2000. Bootsy Collins, a funk musician who had collaborated with Hayes, called him a pioneer who changed music forever. David Porter, Hayes' longtime songwriting partner from the Stax Records years, issued an emotional statement mourning the loss of his creative partner and friend. The Recording Academy, which presents the Grammy Awards, issued a statement honoring Hayes' contributions to music. The statement highlighted his influence on soul, funk, and R&B music. The statement noted that Hayes had won multiple Grammy nominations and had been inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame. The Academy called Hayes' death a tremendous loss for the music community. Comedy Central aired a South Park marathon featuring Chef episodes on the 11th of August 2008, one day after Hayes' death. The network showed episodes from the early seasons when Chef was a central character, appearing frequently. The marathon included episodes like Chocolate Salty Balls, Chef's Chocolate Salty Balls, and other fan-favorite Chef episodes. The network specifically avoided airing The Return of Chef out of respect for Hayes' death. Comedy Central issued a formal statement on the 11th of August 2008. The statement read, "Isaac Hayes was a musical legend, and we at Comedy Central feel privileged to have had him as part of the South Park family. His voice brought life to the character of Chef and touched all of our lives. We will miss Isaac Hayes, and we will always remember the impact he made on South Park and on the entertainment industry." The statement was respectful and focused on Hayes' positive contributions. Parker and Stone released their own statement following Hayes' death. Their statement was issued on the 11th of August 2008. The statement read, "Isaac Hayes was a giant in music and in our hearts. Though Chef will live on in perpetual reruns, he will be deeply missed. We thank Isaac for all his contributions to making South Park the success it is today." The statement was gracious and focused on Hayes' positive work on the show. Parker and Stone did not reference the controversial departure or the Scientology episode. They treated Hayes' death as an occasion to celebrate his contributions rather than relitigate old conflicts. The statement suggested that whatever bad feelings existed in 2006 had been set aside, or at least would not be publicly expressed at a time of mourning. Following Hayes' death in 2008, additional information emerged gradually about the circumstances of his departure from South Park. Isaac Hayes III gave multiple interviews over the years following his father's death. These interviews consistently maintained that Hayes was pressured to quit and did not make the decision freely. Hayes III became the primary source for claims that his father was manipulated by Scientology. In a 2016 interview with The Hollywood Reporter on the 10th anniversary of the departure, Hayes III provided the most detailed account of his father's situation. Hayes III stated, "We talked about this many times. My father had no problem with the show. He loved doing Chef. He enjoyed working with Matt and Trey. The Scientology episode didn't bother him the way people think it did." Hayes III continued, "What happened was the stroke. After the stroke in January, my father was not the same. He lost the ability to speak clearly. His comprehension was affected. He had to go through rehabilitation to relearn basic things. He was in no condition to make career decisions. The people around him at that time were all Scientologists. They made the decision for him." Hayes III explained what he believed happened. "The Scientology people wrote that statement. They put my father's name on it. They sent it out to the media. My father found out about it later and was upset. He told me he didn't quit. He said someone quit for him. But by that point, it was done. He couldn't take it back. His relationship with the show was destroyed." However, these claims by Hayes III remain disputed and unverified. No documentary evidence exists supporting the claim that Scientology officials wrote the departure statement without Hayes' knowledge or consent. Hayes III's account relies entirely on his recollections of private conversations with his father. No other witnesses have come forward to corroborate the story. Without Hayes himself available to confirm or deny, the truth remains uncertain. Some aspects of Hayes III's account are problematic. If Hayes was genuinely upset about the statement being issued in his name, why did he never publicly contradict it? Hayes lived for 2.5 years after the departure statement was released. He gave interviews about music during that time. He could have clarified the situation if the statement did not reflect his views. His continued silence suggests either acceptance of the statement or inability to address the situation. The question of Hayes' agency is important but ultimately unresolvable with available evidence. 3 possibilities exist. First, Hayes genuinely decided to leave South Park because of the Scientology episode, and the departure statement accurately reflected his views. Second, Hayes was pressured by Scientology but agreed to the departure and statement, even if reluctantly. Third, Hayes was incapacitated by his stroke, and the statement was issued entirely without his knowledge or consent. The truth likely falls somewhere among these possibilities, but cannot be determined definitively. Chef never returned to South Park after the return of Chef. Thus, character appeared in extremely brief flashbacks or dream sequences in a few later episodes, but never in new storylines. The character's death was permanent and final. The show moved forward without Chef as a regular character. This absence was noticeable, especially to viewers who had watched since the beginning. Chef had been part of South Park since the pilot episode. His permanent absence marked a significant change in the show's ensemble. Other adult characters expanded their roles to fill some of the narrative space Chef had occupied. Randy Marsh, Stan's father, became increasingly prominent starting in Season 9, and especially Season 10 onward. Randy evolved from a minor supporting character to one of the show's main characters. Many later episodes focused primarily on Randy rather than the boys. Randy became the adult character who drove storylines in ways that Chef had done occasionally in early seasons. PC Principal was introduced in Season 19 as a new authority figure at South Park Elementary. PC Principal became the school's principal and appeared regularly in subsequent seasons. The character served some similar narrative functions to Chef by being an adult at the school who interacted with the boys. However, PC Principal was completely different in personality and approach. Chef had been nurturing and helpful. PC Principal was aggressive and intimidating. The characters were not comparable despite occupying similar structural positions. The absence of Chef represented a genuine loss to the show's ensemble that was never fully replaced. Chef had provided a unique voice and presence. His musical performances had been memorable. His genuine care for the boys had balanced the general incompetence and neglect from other adults. Longtime fans particularly felt Chef's absence. The character had been beloved for good reasons. His removal left a permanent gap. The Isaac Hayes controversy became one of the most significant conflicts in South Park's history. The situation highlighted fundamental tensions between satirical freedom and religious sensitivity. Parker and Stone maintained their position that no subject should be exempt from satire. Hayes felt that his religion deserved protection that other religions did not receive. This disagreement was philosophical and could not be resolved through compromise. The conflict also demonstrated the power and influence that the Church of Scientology wielded over its celebrity members. Whether Hayes genuinely wanted to leave or was pressured to leave, Scientology clearly played a central role in his departure. The organization's response to being satirized was aggressive and effective. Scientology succeeded in forcing the removal of one of South Park's main characters. This represented a victory for the organization's intimidation tactics. The controversy raised important questions about how far satire can go when addressing religion. Most commentators and legal experts agree that South Park had the legal right to satirize Scientology. The First Amendment protected the show's speech. However, legal rights do not resolve moral or ethical questions. Some argued that deliberately offending people's deeply held religious beliefs was wrong even if legally permitted. Others argued that religion must be open to criticism and mockery, like any other belief system. The Hayes situation was never resolved satisfactorily for anyone involved. Hayes died without reconciling with Parker and Stone. The possibility of resolution disappeared with his death in 2008. Chef's brutal death remained the final word on the matter. The relationship between a beloved character and the creators who brought him to life ended badly because of religious controversy. The situation left lasting bitterness and regret even as all parties move forward. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on. South Park episodes are created in 6 days. Most animated television shows require 6 to 9 months to produce a single episode from initial writing to final broadcast. South Park completes this entire process in less than 1 week. This production schedule is unprecedented in television animation history and allows South Park to comment on current events with a speed that is impossible for any other animated program in existence. The 6-day production cycle represents one of the most demanding and intense workflows in all of television and has remained essentially unchanged for over 15 years since being established around 2008. Traditional television animation follows a lengthy, multi-stage process that makes rapid production completely impossible. The process begins with writers spending several weeks or even months developing episode concepts and writing scripts. A typical animated show employs a writer's room where multiple writers collaborate on story ideas. The group breaks down story arcs, develops character moments, and outlines episodes. Individual writers are then assigned specific episodes to write. The writing process for a single episode typically takes 2 to 3 weeks minimum. Scripts go through multiple drafts and revision cycles. Writers incorporate notes and feedback from showrunners, producers, and network executives. A first draft is reviewed and notes are provided. The writer revises based on notes and submits a second draft. This process repeats multiple times. 3 to 5 drafts of a script are common before the script is considered final and ready for production. The revision process adds several additional weeks to the timeline. Once a script is finalized and locked, it moves to the storyboard department. Storyboard artists read the script and visualize every shot of the episode. They draw panels showing camera angles, character positions, and action for every scene. Storyboards serve as visual blueprints that guide animators during production. Storyboarding is a detailed artistic process requiring artistic skill and understanding of cinematography and storytelling. The storyboarding phase typically takes 4 to 6 weeks for a single 22-minute episode. Multiple storyboard artists work simultaneously on different sequences to complete the work faster. However, even with multiple artists working in parallel, the process remains time-consuming. Each artist must draw hundreds of panels showing sequential action. The panels must be detailed enough to communicate clearly what should appear on screen. Rough sketches are refined into cleaner drawings that can be easily understood by animators. The completed storyboards are reviewed by directors and showrunners who provide feedback and request changes. Storyboard artists revise their work based on this feedback. This revision process adds additional time. Once storyboards are approved, they are compiled into animatics. Animatics are rough video edits that show the storyboard panels in sequence time to voice recordings. Animatics allow producers to evaluate pacing and timing before expensive animation production begins. Voice recording typically happens during the storyboarding phase. Voice actors record dialogue in professional recording studios. The recording sessions are scheduled based on actors' availability. For shows with celebrity voice casts, scheduling can be challenging and time-consuming. Actors may need to record at different times rather than together. Some actors record from different cities using remote recording setups. The voice recording process can take several weeks to complete for a full episode. Once storyboards and voice recordings are complete, the episode moves into actual animation production. For most American animated television shows, animation is outsourced to animation studios in South Korea, Japan, the Philippines, or other countries where labor costs are lower than in the United States. The approved storyboards and animatics are sent to the overseas studio along with character designs, background art, and technical specifications. The overseas animation studio begins creating the actual animation. For traditional two-dimensional animation, this involves drawing every frame of movement by hand or using digital tools. Animators create keyframes showing important poses and positions. In-between frames are drawn to show the movement between keyframes. This process is called tweening. Background artists create detailed environment paintings showing the locations where scenes take place. The animation process overseas typically takes 8 to 12 weeks for a single episode. Multiple episodes are usually produced simultaneously to maximize efficiency. The animation studio works on several episodes in various stages of completion at any given time. Once animation is completed, the footage is sent back to the American production company for review. Producers examine the animation carefully, looking for errors, mistakes, or quality issues. When problems are identified, correction notes are sent back to the animation studio. The studio makes the requested changes and resubmits the corrected footage. This back-and-forth process can take several additional weeks. Only after all animation is approved and finalized does the episode move to post-production. Post-production includes editing, sound design, music composition, and color correction. The editor assembles all the animated sequences into the final episode structure. Sound designers add sound effects to enhance action and comedy. Foley artists create custom sound effects for specific actions. Music composers create original scores for the episode or select library music from existing catalogs. All audio elements are mixed and balanced to create the final soundtrack. Color correction ensures visual consistency throughout the episode. Colorists adjust brightness, contrast, and color balance so that every scene matches the show's established visual style. The final color-corrected and sound-mixed episode is rendered into a video file formatted for broadcast. Quality control staff watch the finished episode multiple times, looking for any remaining errors or technical problems. This entire traditional animation production process typically requires 26 to 40 weeks from initial writing to finished broadcast-ready episode. 6 to 9 months is standard for American animated television. Some shows with particularly high production values or complex animation require even longer. This lengthy timeline means that animated shows must plan episodes many months in advance. Writers develop Christmas episodes in the summer. Halloween episodes are written in the spring. Current events cannot be referenced because the events will be many months old by the time episodes air. South Park compressed this timeline dramatically through a combination of computer, animation technology, vertical integration of production, and highly efficient organizational structure. The current 6-day production schedule evolved gradually over the show's history through continuous process refinement and technological improvement. Early seasons of South Park required longer production times, even though they were remarkably fast compared to industry standards. Season 1 episodes in 1997 took approximately 6 to 8 weeks to produce from script to broadcast. This was already extraordinarily fast compared to other animated shows, which required 6 to 9 months. However, it was not the extreme speed that would later define South Park's production method. The show used relatively primitive computer animation tools in 1997. The software was less sophisticated and required more manual work. The production team was still learning and refining their processes. The production timeline shortened progressively as the team developed more efficient techniques and adopted better animation technology. By Season 7, which aired in 2003, South Park episodes were being completed in approximately 3 weeks from start to finish. This represented a major achievement in production efficiency. The team had refined workflows, improved software tools, and trained staff to work at much higher speeds. 3 weeks from concept to broadcast was faster than any other animated show on television. By Season 10 in 2006, the timeline had decreased to approximately 2 weeks per episode. This meant that episodes could reference events that occurred just 2 weeks before broadcast. The show could comment on relatively current events rather than only timeless topics. However, Parker and Stone wanted to move even faster. They wanted the ability to respond to current events happening within days of broadcast rather than weeks. They wanted South Park to feel immediate and relevant in ways that no animated show had ever achieved. The breakthrough to the 6-day production schedule occurred around Season 12 in 2008. By this point, South Park had been on the air for over a decade. The production team had refined their processes to maximum efficiency. Computer animation technology had improved substantially since 1997. Maya software could produce animations much faster than the tools available in earlier years. The entire production infrastructure had evolved specifically to support rapid episode creation. The 6-day schedule was not possible when the show began in 1997. Computer animation technology was not advanced enough. The production infrastructure was not sufficiently developed. The staff was not experienced enough to work at such extreme speed. However, by 2008, all these elements had come together to enable the unprecedented 6-day cycle that has continued ever since. The definitive documentation of South Park's production process came in 2011 when Comedy Central produced a feature-length documentary about how the show is made. The documentary was titled 6 Days to Air: The Making of South Park. The film premiered on the 9th of October 2011 on Comedy Central. The documentary was directed by Arthur Bradford, a filmmaker who specialized in documentary work. Bradford and his camera crew embedded with Parker, Stone, and the South Park production staff for one complete production cycle. The documentary crew followed one episode from the very beginning, when Parker and Stone first discussed what the episode would be about, through every stage of production, to the final delivery of the finished episode for broadcast. The documentary showed the day-by-day structure of the production week. Cameras captured meetings, writing sessions, animation work, voice recording, editing, and every other aspect of creating an episode. The documentary provided unprecedented behind-the-scenes access to South Park's production. The documentary revealed the specific day-by-day structure of South Park's 6-day production schedule. The structure follows an extremely rigid framework that repeats identically every week during the production season. The schedule has remained essentially unchanged for over 15 years. Each day has specific tasks and responsibilities that must be completed before the next day can begin. Day 1 is Wednesday. The production week begins on Wednesday morning when Parker and Stone arrive at South Park Studios in Culver City, California. South Park Studios is a dedicated production facility that houses all departments involved in creating the show. The building contains writing offices, recording studios, animation workstations, editing suites, and meeting rooms. Everything required to produce an episode exists within this single building. This vertical integration is crucial to the rapid production schedule. Parker and Stone meet in a conference room on Wednesday morning to decide what the current episode will be about. This decision-making session typically lasts several hours. The two creators sit together discussing current events, news stories, political developments, cultural phenomena, and personal ideas. They talk about what has happened recently that might make good material for an episode. They consider which topics would be funny or interesting to explore. They debate different story approaches and concepts. The Wednesday morning meeting often involves significant stress and uncertainty because Parker and Stone frequently arrive without knowing what the episode will be. Unlike most television shows where episodes are planned weeks or months in advance, South Park's creative process deliberately delays this decision until the absolute last possible moment. This delay allows the show to address events that happened as recently as the previous weekend, or even earlier in the same week. A news story that broke on Monday could be the subject of an episode that airs the following Wednesday. However, this approach also means that every production cycle begins with fundamental uncertainty. Parker and Stone must commit to an idea knowing they have only 6 days to complete it. They cannot change their minds once production begins. They cannot start over if the idea does not work. Whatever concept they choose on Wednesday morning must be developed into a finished episode by the following Tuesday. The pressure of this decision creates anxiety at the start of each production week. The documentary 6 Days to Air captured this Wednesday morning meeting during production of the episode Human Centipede, which aired on the 27th of April 2011. The footage showed Parker and Stone struggling to decide what the episode should be about. They discussed several potential ideas, including topics about the royal wedding of Prince William and Kate Middleton, the controversy over Sony's PlayStation Network being hacked, and updates to Apple's iTunes Terms of Service agreement. The meeting showed Parker and Stone debating these different concepts for hours. Stone suggested doing something about the royal wedding because it was dominating news coverage that week. Parker was not enthusiastic about the royal wedding idea. He thought it had been covered extensively already. They discussed the PlayStation Network hack but decided the story was too technical and not funny enough. They eventually settled on creating an episode about Apple's iTunes user agreement, combined with a parody of the body horror film The Human Centipede. The documentary footage revealed how uncertain and stressful this decision-making process was. Parker and Stone expressed frustration and anxiety about choosing the right topic. They worried about whether their chosen concept would be funny enough to sustain an entire episode. They second-guessed their decision multiple times before finally committing. This anxiety repeats every Wednesday at the start of every production week. By Wednesday afternoon, Parker and Stone have usually selected a topic and basic story concept for the episode. Once the decision is made, Parker begins writing the script. He writes alone at his computer in an office at South Park Studios. Parker does most of the actual script writing for South Park episodes. Stone provides feedback, suggestions, and ideas throughout the writing process, but Parker types the actual pages. This division of labor has remained consistent throughout the show's run. Parker writes continuously through Wednesday night. He typically works until very late Wednesday evening or into early Thursday morning. The goal is to have a rough first draft of the script completed by Thursday morning. This means Parker often works for 18 to 20 hours straight during the initial writing phase. The documentary showed Parker writing late into the night while Stone had gone home to sleep. Parker remained at South Park Studios typing dialogue and developing scenes. The writing process is intense and exhausting. Parker must develop a complete story with beginning, middle, and end. He must create funny dialogue and scenes that will work when animated. He must write approximately 40 pages of script covering the full 22-minute episode runtime. All of this must be accomplished in approximately 12 to 18 hours of continuous writing. Parker relies on caffeine, snack food, and sheer determination to maintain focus through the long Wednesday night writing session. Day 2 is Thursday. Parker continues refining and revising the script throughout Thursday morning. He polishes dialogue, adjusts scene descriptions, and fixes structural problems. Stone reviews Parker's work and suggests changes and improvements. The script goes through multiple revisions during Thursday morning as Parker incorporates Stone's feedback. The collaborative process involves intense discussions about what works and what doesn't work. By Thursday afternoon, a relatively polished version of the script needs to be ready for distribution to the production team. The script is printed and given to every department that needs it, including animation, art direction, sound, and editing. Each department receives the script and begins preliminary planning for their work. Animators read the script to understand what scenes they will need to create. Art directors identify any new character designs or location designs required for the episode. Voice recording begins on Thursday afternoon. Parker and Stone record dialogue for most characters themselves, using a professional recording studio at South Park Studios. The voice recording sessions are relatively quick and efficient because Parker and Stone are experienced voice actors who have been performing these characters for over 25 years. They know their characters intimately. They can deliver multiple takes rapidly without extensive preparation or rehearsal. Parker and Stone record together in the same studio simultaneously rather than recording their performances separately at different times. This technique allows them to perform dialogue back and forth as if having actual conversations. When Stan and Kyle have a conversation in an episode, Parker and Stone are actually talking to each other in real time during recording. The natural rhythm and timing of genuine conversation comes through in the performances. The actors can react authentically to what the other person is saying rather than recording lines in isolation. Recording a full episode's worth of dialogue typically takes several hours on Thursday afternoon. Parker and Stone perform multiple characters within single recording sessions, switching between character voices as needed. If a scene features Stan, Cartman, Kyle, and Kenny all talking together, Parker and Stone perform all 4 characters, alternating between voices as they deliver lines. The sound engineer records each character's dialogue on separate audio tracks to allow for easier editing and mixing later in the production process. The voice actresses who perform female characters also record on Thursday. Mona Marshall and April Stewart, who have voiced female characters since Season 7, come to South Park Studios for recording sessions. They perform dialogue for characters including Wendy Testaberger, Sharon Marsh, Sheila Broflovsky, and numerous other female characters. The actresses work quickly and professionally, delivering performances that match the established voices for their characters. Parker and Stone often improvise new dialogue during recording sessions. If they think of funnier lines while performing, they ad-lib variations that deviate from the written script. These improvisations frequently make it into final episodes because they sound more natural and spontaneous than scripted dialogue. The flexibility to change dialogue during recording is one advantage of having the writers also serve as the primary voice actors. If an improvised line is funnier than what was written, Parker simply incorporates the new line into the script. There's no need to get approval from writers who are not present because Parker is both writer and performer. While voice recording happens on Thursday afternoon, the animation department begins preliminary work on the episode. The art department starts creating any new character designs or location designs required by the script. If the episode features new characters that have never appeared before in South Park history, those characters need to be designed and created as digital assets in Maya software. If the episode takes place in new locations, those locations need to be designed and built as virtual environments. The art department works from the script to identify what new visual elements are needed. They read through the script, noting every character mentioned and every location described. They compare this information against South Park's existing library of character models and location models. Anything new that does not already exist must be created from scratch. Character designers sketch different visual concepts for new characters. They show these sketches to Parker and Stone for approval. Once a design is approved, 3D modelers create the character as a digital model in Maya. Location designers create background environments for new settings. They design buildings, interiors, outdoor locations, and any other spaces where scenes take place. The locations must match South Park's established visual style while being distinctive enough to serve the episode's needs. Background artists work quickly to create these locations because animation will begin using them on Friday. Day 3 is Friday. By Friday morning, the script should be essentially finished and finalized. The final script is distributed to all departments. Any last-minute changes must be incorporated quickly because production is accelerating. Storyboard artists begin creating storyboards showing every shot of the episode. Unlike traditional animation where storyboarding takes weeks, South Park storyboard artists must complete boards for an entire episode in less than 2 days. The storyboards are crude sketches rather than polished drawings. They show camera angles, character positions, and basic action for every scene. The storyboards serve as blueprints that guide animators. South Park's storyboards are much simpler than those used in traditional animation because the production timeline does not allow time for detailed artwork. The storyboards communicate essential information about composition and staging without artistic refinement. The animation department begins creating rough animation based on the storyboards and script. South Park uses Maya software for all animation production. Maya is a professional 3D animation and modeling software package used throughout the film and television industry. South Park uses Maya even though the show looks two-dimensional because the software allows for rapid production while maintaining the construction, paper aesthetic established by the pilot episode. The animation process involves positioning digital character models in virtual environments and animating their movements frame by frame. South Park's animation style is deliberately simple and crude to allow for rapid production. Characters are two-dimensional, cutout style figures that move in limited ways. Movements are jerky and mechanical rather than smooth and natural. Arms and legs move in simple arcs. Characters slide across the ground rather than showing detailed walking animations with realistic weight and momentum. This simplified animation style is both an aesthetic choice and a practical necessity given the production timeline. More sophisticated animation with fluid movements, realistic physics, and detailed character acting would require substantially more time to create. South Park's crude animation can be produced quickly because animators do not need to perfect every movement. A character walking across a room can be animated in minutes by sliding the character model across the virtual ground. There's no need to animate leg movements, weight shifts, or subtle body movements that realistic walking would require. Multiple animators work simultaneously on different scenes throughout Friday. The episode is divided among the animation team, with each animator assigned specific scenes or sequences. One animator might handle all classroom scenes showing the boys at school. Another animator works on outdoor scenes in the town. A third animator handles scenes with specific characters or locations. The work is divided strategically to maximize efficiency and ensure all scenes are completed on time. However, constant coordination is necessary to ensure visual consistency across the episode. All animators must use the same character models and follow the same style guidelines. If different animators create scenes featuring the same character, those scenes must look consistent. The character must be the same size, wear the same clothing, and move in similar ways across all scenes. Animation directors oversee the work and ensure consistency. Day 4 is Saturday. Saturday is typically the longest and most intense workday of the production week. The animation work that began on Friday accelerates dramatically on Saturday. Nearly every member of the animation team works full 12 to 16-hour days on Saturday. The rough animation created on Friday is refined and polished. Animators add detail to character movements. They create facial expressions and mouth movements synchronized to dialogue. They refine timing and pacing of scenes. Background artists complete environment designs showing the locations where scenes take place. The backgrounds are created as digital paintings or assembled from existing library elements. South Park maintains an extensive library of pre-built background elements that can be reused across episodes. Standard locations like the school, the boys' houses, the town streets, and other frequently appearing places already exist as completed background files. These library elements can be quickly incorporated into new episodes, saving substantial production time. However, each episode also requires some unique background elements specific to that episode's story. If the episode features the boys visiting a new location like a museum, amusement park, or factory, that location needs to be designed and created as a new background. Background artists work quickly on Saturday creating these unique elements while also assembling standard library elements into complete scene compositions. The editing team begins assembling scenes in sequence on Saturday afternoon. As animators finish individual scenes, those completed scenes are delivered to the editing department. The editors place scenes in order according to the script. They begin creating the episode's overall structure and pacing. The editors synchronize the voice recordings with character animation to ensure dialogue matches mouth movements. This process is called lip sync and requires precise timing. Parker and Stone review animation constantly throughout Saturday as it is completed. They watch every scene and provide feedback and revision notes. If an animator has interpreted a scene differently than Parker and Stone envisioned, corrections must be made immediately. There is no time to redo work later in the week. Everything must be approved and finalized as production progresses. The iterative review process continues throughout Saturday, with animators implementing notes and resubmitting scenes for approval. Saturday workdays are brutal for the entire production staff. Animators arrive at South Park Studios early Saturday morning and work late into Saturday night. Some staff members work through the night from Saturday into Sunday to meet deadlines. The documentary 6 Days to Air showed animation staff sleeping at their desks for brief periods before waking and continuing work. Coffee, energy drinks, and takeout food sustained the team through the long hours. The 6 Days to Air documentary captured the exhaustion and stress of Saturday production. The footage showed animators working at computer workstations with red eyes and tired faces. People stretched and moved around periodically to stay alert. The studio's break rooms were filled with snack food, coffee machines, and tired production staff taking short breaks before returning to work. The Saturday grind was physically and mentally demanding for everyone involved. Day 5 is Sunday. All remaining animation must be completed on Sunday. Any scenes that were not finished on Saturday must be finalized by Sunday evening. There are no extensions or delays possible. The episode must be completely animated by Sunday night, or it cannot air on Wednesday. This hard deadline creates enormous pressure on the animation team. Sunday work continues the Saturday pattern with long hours and intense focus. Animators complete final scenes. They make last-minute adjustments to timing and movement. They fix any errors or problems identified during review. The goal is to have every single scene fully animated and approved by Sunday evening. As each scene is finished and approved, it is delivered to the editing department for incorporation into the episode. The sound department adds music and sound effects throughout Sunday. South Park uses a combination of original music composed specifically for episodes and library music from existing commercial music libraries. When episodes require original songs, those songs are composed and recorded during the production week. The song composition must happen extremely quickly. A songwriter creates music and lyrics within a day or two. Musicians record the song in a professional recording studio. The finished recording is delivered to the sound team for incorporation into the episode. Sound effects are added to enhance action and comedy. South Park's sound design is relatively simple compared to high-budget animated features. However, sound effects are still necessary to support visual gags and action sequences. The sound team works from the edited animation, adding audio elements to every scene. Footsteps, door slams, explosions, impacts, and other sound effects are layered into the soundtrack. The editing team creates the final cut of the episode on Sunday evening. All completed and approved scenes are assembled in final sequence. The episode's timing is refined to ensure it runs exactly 22 minutes without commercials. The voice acting, animation, music, and sound effects are all synchronized and balanced. The audio levels are mixed so that dialogue, music, and sound effects are all at appropriate relative volumes. Parker and Stone conduct a final comprehensive review of the complete episode on Sunday evening or night. They watch the entire episode from start to finish as it will appear when broadcast. They evaluate whether the episode is funny, whether the story works, and whether any final changes are needed. If they identify problems during this final review, those changes must be implemented immediately because there is very limited time remaining before delivery. The final review on Sunday night is when Parker and Stone know definitively whether they have successfully created a good episode. Sometimes they are satisfied with what they have created. Other times they recognize that the episode has problems, but there is no time to fix everything. The documentary showed Parker expressing disappointment about certain aspects of the Human Centipede episode during final review. He felt some jokes were not as funny as he had hoped. However, there was no time to rewrite or reanimate significant portions. The episode was what it was. By Sunday night or very early Monday morning, the episode is essentially finished. All major creative work is complete. The episode is watchable from start to finish with complete animation, voice acting, music, and sound effects. Any remaining work on Monday is technical rather than creative. Sunday nights bring relief mixed with exhaustion. The production team has successfully completed another episode against an absurdly tight deadline. The perfect record of never missing a delivery deadline remains intact. Day 6 is Monday. Monday is dedicated entirely to final technical preparation of the episode for broadcast. No new creative work happens on Monday. The episode is already complete creatively. Monday involves rendering, quality control, color correction, audio mastering, and file delivery. These technical processes are necessary to create a broadcast-ready video file that meets Comedy Central's specifications. The finished episode is rendered into a high-quality video file. Rendering is the computer process of converting the Maya animation files into actual video footage. The rendering process takes several hours because the computer must process every frame of the 22-minute episode. While rendering happens automatically once initiated, the process must be monitored to ensure no errors occur. Color correction is performed on Monday to ensure visual consistency throughout the episode. Colorists adjust brightness, contrast, and color balance across all scenes. They ensure that scenes match South Park's established visual style. They fix any shots where lighting appears inconsistent. They make sure that the overall color palette matches expectations. The color correction process is relatively simple for South Park compared to more visually complex animated shows, but it still requires professional expertise and attention to detail. Audio mastering finalizes the soundtrack. Audio engineers ensure that all dialogue is clearly audible and properly balanced. They verify that music is at appropriate levels that support scenes without overwhelming dialogue. They check that sound effects are present and effective. They create the final stereo mix that will be broadcast. The mastered audio is synchronized with the color-corrected video to create the final episode file. Quality control checks are performed throughout Monday. Technical specialists watch the finished episode looking for any errors or technical problems. They check for audio sync issues where dialogue does not match character mouth movements. They look for visual glitches, animation errors, or color problems. They verify that the episode meets all technical requirements for broadcast quality, including proper video resolution, frame rate, and audio specifications. If quality control staff identify any problems, those issues must be fixed immediately on Monday. There is no time to defer fixes to later. Any problems discovered must be addressed before the episode is delivered to Comedy Central. The production team fixes issues as they are identified. This might involve re-rendering certain shots, adjusting audio levels, or making other technical corrections. The finished episode is delivered to Comedy Central by Monday evening. The delivery happens electronically through secure file transfer systems. Comedy Central receives the video file and loads it into their broadcast system. The file is verified to ensure it meets all technical specifications. Once the network confirms receipt and acceptance of the file, the episode is officially delivered and the production team's responsibility is complete. The episode is scheduled to air on Wednesday night at 10 p.m., exactly 1 week after Parker and Stone first decided what the episode would be about on Wednesday morning of the previous week. This completes the 6-day production cycle. The pattern then repeats the following week with a new episode. During active production season, this cycle continues for 10 consecutive weeks to produce a full season of 10 episodes. This 6-day schedule allows South Park to respond to current events with remarkable speed that no other animated show can match. The show has created episodes about news events that occurred just days before broadcast. The most famous example of this rapid topical response is the episode about last night, which dealt with the 2008 United States presidential election between Barack Obama and John McCain. The election occurred on Tuesday, the 4th of November, 2008. Voting took place throughout the day across the United States. Results were counted Tuesday evening and into early Wednesday morning as polls closed in different time zones. Barack Obama's victory became clear late Tuesday night. Obama was declared the winner around 11 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday, the 4th of November, when he secured enough electoral votes to win the presidency. South Park began production on about last night, immediately after Obama's victory was confirmed. Parker and Stone worked through Tuesday night and Wednesday, writing a script that incorporated specific details from Tuesday's election. The episode featured Obama and McCain as main characters. The episode included references to Obama's victory speech delivered at Grant Park in Chicago and McCain's concession speech delivered in Phoenix, Arizona. Both speeches had occurred just hours before South Park's writers incorporated them into the script. The episode depicted immediate reactions to the election results from various South Park characters. Some characters celebrated Obama's victory. Others were devastated by McCain's loss. The episode showed the town divided by the election outcome. The animation team worked at maximum speed throughout the week to complete the episode using their established 6-day production process. About Last Night aired on Wednesday, the 5th of November 2008 at 10 p.m., less than 24 hours after Obama's victory was confirmed. The episode was technically in production for less than the full 6 days because work began late Tuesday night rather than Wednesday morning of the previous week. The extremely compressed timeline demonstrated how fast South Park could move when necessary to address breaking news and current events. No other television show could have produced an episode about Tuesday night's election that aired Wednesday night. Live-action shows could potentially respond quickly by filming new scenes and editing them into episodes. However, animation normally requires months of production time. The idea that an animated show could write, voice, animate, and broadcast an episode about an event that occurred less than 24 hours earlier was unprecedented in television history. The speed was remarkable and demonstrated the unique capability enabled by South Park's 6-day production schedule. The episode attracted 3.1 million viewers for its Wednesday night broadcast, which was strong viewership for South Park during Season 12. Viewers were amazed that the show had created an episode about the election so quickly. Media outlets wrote extensive articles about South Park's rapid production capabilities. Publications including the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Entertainment Weekly published stories explaining how South Park had accomplished this feat. The episode became a demonstration of the practical value of the 6-day schedule for topical relevance. Another notable example of rapid topical commentary was the episode Raising the Bar, which aired on the 16th of October 2013 during Season 17. This episode featured extensive references to the troubled launch of the Healthcare.gov website. The Affordable Care Act's online health insurance marketplace had launched on the 1st of October 2013. The website experienced massive technical problems during its first weeks of operation. The Healthcare.gov website crashed frequently under heavy traffic loads. Users could not create accounts or complete applications. Error message appeared constantly. The technological failures became a major political story and source of embarrassment for the Obama administration. News coverage of the website problems dominated headlines throughout early October 2013. Republican politicians seized on the failures as evidence that the Affordable Care Act was poorly implemented and unworkable. South Park created an episode satirizing the healthcare.gov problems while the story was still actively developing and current. The episode aired just 15 days after the website launch. The episode featured explicit references to website crashes, error messages, and the public frustration with the technical failures. Parker and Stone wrote and produced the episode while news coverage of healthcare.gov was still dominating political discussion. The timing made the satire effective and immediately relevant to viewers who were following the news story. By the time the episode aired on the 16th of October, viewers were actively discussing healthcare.gov failures. The website problems were major news. South Park's commentary arrived while audiences cared intensely about the topic. If the episode had aired months later after the website was fixed, the satire would have felt dated and less impactful. The 6-day production schedule enabled South Park to comment while the issue was fresh and relevant. The 6-day production schedule requires extraordinary dedication and commitment from the entire South Park production staff. According to interviews and behind-the-scenes materials, the production team consists of approximately 70 to 80 full-time employees during active production. These employees work exclusively on South Park throughout the production season. They understand and accept the demanding schedule as part of working on the show. Most episodes are produced during a season that runs from late summer through early winter each year. South Park typically produces seasons between August and December. The staff works 10 consecutive weeks of 6-day production cycles to complete a full season of 10 episodes. This represents an intense period of sustained work with minimal breaks. After completing the season, the staff gets several months off before the next production cycle begins. Each week during production begins with uncertainty about what the episode will cover and ends with a finished product broadcast to millions of viewers worldwide. The staff works one episode at a time with no overlap. They do not begin work on episode 2 until episode 1 is completed and delivered. This single episode focus allows the entire team to concentrate all resources on one project. However, it also means that every week the pressure resets to maximum intensity. There is no cushion or buffer. Every episode must be completed on time every week without exception. The schedule takes a significant physical and mental toll on Parker and Stone personally. Both creators have described the production process as utterly exhausting in numerous interviews over the years. Parker serves as the primary writer for most episodes. He writes alone for extended periods with minimal sleep. According to the 6 Days to Air documentary, Parker sometimes works for 36 consecutive hours during the middle of the production week. Parker writes through Wednesday night into Thursday morning. He continues working all day Thursday. He sometimes keeps writing through Thursday night into Friday morning without sleeping. By Friday morning, he has been awake for over 30 hours while writing continuously. The documentary showed Parker at his computer at 30 a.m. Thursday night, looking exhausted, but continuing to type script pages. He survived on coffee, energy drinks, and determination. Stone's role focuses more on animation oversight, creative feedback, and collaboration rather than primary writing. Stone watches animation as it is produced throughout the week. He provides notes to animators about what needs to be changed or improved. He reviews completed scenes and makes decisions about pacing and timing. Stone also contributes ideas and suggestions to the script as Parker writes. However, Stone's workload is somewhat less intense than Parker's because he is not responsible for actually typing every word of the script. Both Parker and Stone make all major creative decisions about every episode. No scenes are animated, no dialogue is recorded, and no music is composed without their review and approval. This centralized creative control ensures consistency and maintains their vision but also creates bottlenecks. Parker and Stone must review everything constantly throughout the production week. They cannot delegate final decisions to other people. The show is their creative vision, and they maintain absolute control over every aspect. The production staff also experiences significant physical and mental exhaustion from the demanding schedule. Animators work extremely long hours, particularly on Saturdays and Sundays, when most animation production occurs. The documentary footage showed animation staff working through Saturday night into Sunday morning. Some employees worked for 3 consecutive days with only brief naps rather than actual sleep. They slept at their desks in office chairs for 2 or 3 hours before waking and continuing work. The sound department and editing team face similar demands. Everyone understands that the episode must be finished on time. There's no flexibility in the deadline. Missing a broadcast date would be catastrophic and has never happened in South Park's history. The perfect delivery record creates pressure to maintain that record. Every week, someone could be the person whose failure causes South Park to miss a deadline for the first time. That pressure motivates people to push through exhaustion and complete their work. If Wednesday morning arrives and the episode is not complete and ready for broadcast, Comedy Central would have to air a rerun instead of the scheduled new episode. This scenario has never occurred. Every single episode across 26 seasons spanning over 25 years has met its deadline. The production team has never failed to deliver a completed episode on time. This perfect record demonstrates both the efficiency of the production system and the extraordinary dedication of the people involved. However, the documentary and various interviews make clear that this perfect record comes at significant personal cost to everyone involved. The physical exhaustion from working 60 to 80 hours per week during production is considerable. The mental stress of maintaining creative quality under extreme time pressure is intense. The documentary showed Parker breaking down emotionally on Sunday night when he realized certain jokes in the episode were not as funny as he had hoped. The pressure and exhaustion overwhelmed him temporarily. The 6-day schedule also creates creative limitations that affect the show's content and style. South Park cannot produce the same level of visual polish as animated shows with longer production times. The animation is functional but deliberately simple and crude. Character designs remain basic with minimal detail. Backgrounds are not elaborately detailed. Visual effects are limited to what can be accomplished quickly. Parker and Stone accept these aesthetic limitations as the necessary price of production speed. They prioritize comedy writing and social commentary over visual sophistication. The show's value comes from the scripts and satire rather than from beautiful animation. South Park will never look as visually impressive as feature-quality animation from Pixar or Disney. However, South Park does not try to compete on visual quality. The show competes on comedic quality, satirical sharpness, and cultural relevance. The 6-day schedule enables that relevance at the cost of visual polish. The characters in South Park are designed specifically to enable rapid animation. They are two-dimensional, cutout-style figures rather than fully three-dimensional models with realistic proportions and complex articulation. Characters have limited articulation points where movement occurs. Arms, legs, and heads move in simple arcs. Facial expressions are created by swapping different mouth and eye shapes rather than animating subtle muscle movements. This simplified approach allows animators to work much faster than they could with more complex character designs. A single animator can complete several scenes per day using South Park's simple character system. With more complex animation showing realistic human movement, weight, and physics, that same animator might complete only a few seconds of footage per day. The simplified character design is essential to making the 6-day schedule possible. The production schedule also affects storytelling and narrative structure in subtle ways. South Park episodes are largely self-contained stories that do not require extensive continuity with previous episodes. Long-term story arcs are relatively rare because Parker and Stone do not know in advance what topics they will cover from week to week. They respond to current events as they happen, rather than planning storylines months in advance. This episodic structure works well for topical satire, but limits opportunities for complex serialized storytelling or gradual character development. When South Park does attempt serialized storytelling with ongoing narratives across multiple episodes, it typically happens within a single season rather than across multiple seasons. The writers develop the serialized storylines week by week during production rather than planning everything in advance. Season 18 in 2014 featured an ongoing storyline about gentrification in South Park and the boys' changing neighborhood. Season 19 in 2015 told a season-long story about PC culture and political correctness dominating the town. Season 20 in 2016 had a serialized narrative about internet trolling and online harassment. However, even these serialized seasons were written week by week rather than being completely planned before production began. Parker and Stone made decisions during each production week about how to continue and develop the narrative. The 6-day production schedule has remained remarkably stable for over 15 years since being established around 2008. Parker and Stone have shown no interest in slowing down or extending their production timeline despite the demanding nature of the work. According to interviews they gave to The Hollywood Reporter and other publications in 2019, they actually enjoy the pressure and urgency of the rapid schedule. Stone stated that the deadline forces them to make decisions quickly and trust their creative instincts rather than overthinking ideas. The time pressure eliminates perfectionism and second-guessing. When you only have 6 days, you cannot endlessly revise and refine. You must commit to ideas and execute them. This constraint can be creatively liberating by removing the paralysis that unlimited time can create. Parker noted that having more time would not necessarily improve the episodes. He suggested that additional time might actually hurt quality because it would allow too much revision and polishing. The first creative instincts are often the funniest, Parker argued. Overthinking jokes can make them less funny. The rapid production forces Parker and Stone to trust their initial impulses. The spontaneity and energy that comes from working fast may enhance the comedy rather than detract from it. Comedy Central benefits significantly from South Park's rapid production schedule. The network can air South Park episodes that comment on events from the same week. This makes the show feel current and vital in ways that other programs cannot match. Viewers perceive South Park as responsive to the cultural moment rather than feeling dated or out of touch. Other animated shows air episodes that were written and produced 6 to 9 months earlier. Those episodes reference events or trends that are no longer current by the time they broadcast. South Park rarely has this problem because of the 6-day schedule. Episodes reference news stories from the previous week or even the previous few days. The show comments on current political controversies, celebrity scandals, technological developments, and cultural phenomena, while those topics still dominate public conversation. This timeliness keeps the show feeling vital and relevant even after 26 seasons and over 25 years on the air. The rapid production schedule represents a competitive advantage that other shows cannot easily replicate. Competing animated shows would need to completely restructure their production processes to achieve similar speed. They would need to adopt South Park's simplified animation style. They would need vertical integration of all production departments. They would need small creative teams willing to work under extreme time pressure. Most animated shows are not willing or able to make these changes. The production schedule represents Parker and Stone's extraordinary commitment to their craft and creative vision. They could easily negotiate a slower, more comfortable production pace with Comedy Central if they wanted. After 26 seasons and enormous financial success, they have earned the right to demand better working conditions. The network would likely agree to whatever timeline Parker and Stone requested because South Park remains valuable programming. However, Parker and Stone maintain the grueling 6-day schedule because they believe it produces the best possible comedy. The pressure of the deadline forces creativity. The time constraint removes options for endless revision. Decisions must be made quickly. Ideas must be executed immediately. This urgency creates specific energy and style that defines South Park. The show feels spontaneous, reactive, and immediate. These qualities come directly from the production process. South Park has defied every expectation and broken every rule of how television is supposed to work. What started as construction paper cutouts animated frame by frame in 1997 became one of the longest-running and most influential shows in television history. The show that nearly got canceled after its first season due to advertiser boycotts and religious protests is now entering its 27th season with no end in sight. The journey from that crude pilot episode to the cultural phenomenon we know today is filled with moments that seemed impossible at the time, creating entire episodes in 6 days, killing off a main character permanently only to bring him back a year later, losing Isaac Hayes over a Scientology episode, and responding with one of the most brutal character deaths ever animated, introducing characters with disabilities that generated nationwide protests but eventually became beloved parts of the ensemble, influencing actual political elections with phrases like giant douche versus turd sandwich that entered the permanent vocabulary of American democracy. What makes South Park remarkable is not just its longevity, but its continued relevance. Most shows that run for 26 seasons become stale, predictable, and culturally irrelevant. They coast on nostalgia and established formulas. South Park has remained sharp, current, and willing to take risks that newer shows avoid. The 6-day production schedule that would destroy most creative teams has become South Park's greatest strength, allowing commentary on events that happened days earlier rather than months ago. Parker and Stone's refusal to compromise their vision has been tested repeatedly. Advertisers demanded they change content or face boycotts. Religious organizations demanded they be canceled. Scientology allegedly pressured one of their main voice actors to quit. Censorship battles with Comedy Central resulted in episodes that remain unavailable through official channels. Throughout all of this, Parker and Stone maintained creative control and pushed forward. The show's impact extends far beyond entertainment. South Park has introduced concepts, phrases, and frameworks into political discourse that persist years after episodes aired. Academic researchers study the show's effects on political attitudes. Politicians reference South Park in speeches. Voters cite episodes when discussing current events. What began as crude comedy has become a genuine cultural force that shapes how Americans understand and discuss politics, religion, and society. South Park has also demonstrated that animation can be more than just children's entertainment or family-friendly comedy. The show proved that animated satire could address serious topics, offend powerful institutions, and maintain artistic integrity while achieving commercial success. South Park paved the way for shows like Rick and Morty, BoJack Horseman, and other adult animated series that push boundaries and take risks. The construction paper aesthetic that began as a practical necessity for a student film project became one of the most recognizable visual styles in television. Even though episodes have been computer animated since season 2, the show maintained that handmade crude quality that makes it instantly identifiable. That visual style became brand identity that has remained consistent for over 25 years. Most importantly, South Park has remained defiantly itself. The show has never tried to become something it's not. It has never softened its edges to appeal to broader audiences. It has never abandoned its commitment to offending everyone equally. In an era when most entertainment tries desperately to avoid controversy and please everyone, South Park continues being deliberately offensive and unapologetically crude. After 26 seasons, over 300 episodes, countless controversies, multiple feature films, video games, and cultural moments, South Park shows no signs of stopping. Parker and Stone signed a deal with Viacom CBS in 2021, extending the show through season 30 and including multiple made-for-streaming movies. South Park will continue into at least 2027, making it over 30 years old. The show that was supposed to be a flash-in-the-pan, controversial gimmick has become a permanent fixture of American television. The crude animated comedy that parents groups tried to ban is now studied in universities. The show that nearly got canceled multiple times has outlasted most of its critics and continues thriving. South Park's legacy is secure, regardless of when it eventually ends. The show changed television animation forever. It proved that crude simplicity could succeed alongside expensive polish. It demonstrated that topical relevance matters more than timeless perfection. It showed that creative freedom and artistic integrity could coexist with commercial success. For over a quarter century, 4 foul-mouthed kids from a small mountain town in Colorado have been making us laugh, making us think, and making us uncomfortable. They've killed Kenny hundreds of times. They've offended every religion, mocked every politician, and satirized every cultural phenomenon. And somehow, after all these years and all these episodes, they're still finding new ways to shock us, surprise us, and remind us why South Park remains essential viewing. Thank you for watching this deep dive into South Park's incredible history. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future long-form content. Let me know in the comments which South Park fact surprised you the most, or if there are other shows you'd like to see covered in this format. Until next time, remember, they killed Kenny, those bastards, and we'll see you in the next one.